Attention wrestling fans, have you ever watched wrestling on TV and thought, hey, I would love to be a wrestler? Well, your dream is about to come true. The ECW Wrestling Academy is now accepting students ready to be trained to become a professional wrestler, manager, or referee. It's only $3,000 per student with $1,500 down and $500 a month. You'll be trained by the superstars of the ECW. Only the serious need apply. It's not for everyone.
The 1990s were a hell of a time to be a wrestling fan. Being fortunate enough to witness a revolution in this wonderful world of glitter and spandex. A revolution which would change the entire pro wrestling landscape, and one which would continue to be felt all the way to the modern day. The fluorescent lights of the 1990s in WWF had begun to flicker out. Fans were growing ever more tired of the peroxide blonde all-American hero, inevitably overcoming the odds on their way to gold and glory. As the final few neon bulbs began to dim, one man and his anarchic band of merry men grabbed that fluorescent tube and smashed it over the heads of their audiences. From the darkness climbed the counterculture of the time. Young men and women were sick of living in this sanitized world created by their parents and started to rebel. With this new generation came a desire for something more visceral, more realistic, and altogether more extreme. ECW's impact on professional wrestling cannot be understated. Its commitment to authenticity, creative freedom, and innovation in both in-ring action and storytelling set it apart from other promotions of its time. By pushing the boundaries and embracing their hardcore style, ECW captured the imagination of wrestling fans around the world. Despite its relatively short lifespan, ECW's enduring legacy can be seen in the continued influence it has on the industry today. The positives of ECW laid in its ability to revolutionize wrestling, elevate underrated talent, and cultivate a passionate fan base, making it an essential chapter in the history of the sport. However, a company that was so committed to pushing boundaries and playing on the very edge of public decency and morality was also destined to step across that line at some point. In this video, I want to see how Extreme Championship Wrestling was formed from the ashes of the National Wrestling Alliance. Through hard work, revolutionary thinking, and more than a handful of deception, I will see how ECW became an answer to those young people seeking something fresh and exciting from their weekly pro wrestling television show, and how the darkness, which once was the birthplace of a systematic change within the industry, eventually became the same darkness that would destroy it.
Welcome everyone to the WrestlePod. Subscribe now for more pro wrestling and pop culture content.
That answer is that ECW is a tradition that was started by Terry Funk. And Terry Funk started that tradition not just in the United States, but in Japan as well. And that tradition is not just classic wrestling, and that tradition is not just hardcore brawling, and that tradition is not just taking wrestling to the extreme. It's to be the hardest working athlete in the sport today, to make sure that no more rip-offs for the fans. No more fans come to the building and put down their money and say, I shouldn't have spent my dollar or my yen.
When Tri-State Wrestling Alliance and then owner Joel Goodhart begun putting on shows in front of 50 people in 1990, little could anyone have predicted the immense growth and changes that the company would undergo over the next decade. By February of 1992, Goodhart had decided to sell his majority stake in the company to his close business associate in Todd Gordon, a pawnbroker and jewelry store owner in Philadelphia. Gordon would change the name of the company to ECW, but at this stage, the E stood for Eastern. The head booker for the company, and also its most notable wrestling figure at this time, was Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert.
Gilbert had booked in a couple of places and he was pretty creative. He had some success.
Whom Todd Gordon would keep on to run the show with his greater knowledge and understanding of the inner workings of the pro wrestling business. Eddie had an absolutely brilliant mind that was driven by a second-to-none passion for the business. Around this time, the newly rebranded wrestling company put on its first show at the original sports bar in Philadelphia. The first match on the card featured a familiar face in Stevie Richards, a man who will appear throughout this whole story. Every match, every experience, not just ECW, it's just another way to gain experience. In ECW, not only did I have to mature in the ring and get seasoned, learn how to work and deal with the politics, I also had to grow as a young man. It was difficult, but it made me the person I am today, and I'm pretty happy about that. Gilbert soon recognised the need to crown the company's own World Heavyweight Champion, and he and Todd Gordon began preparing for ECW's inaugural coronation. In April of 1992, in front of about 400 people, Snuka was declared the victor and became the company's first ever champion. However, he would only hold the belt for 24 hours, dropping it to Johnny Hotbody a day later.
Hey, all you people out there, if you're interested in raising some money for your school or your organization, all you have to do is give us a call at the number on your TV screen, and Johnny Hotbody and the whole ECW will be in your town, whether you want us there or not.
Hotbody and Snuka would then begin a feud which saw Superfly regain the championship in July. Jimmy Snuka was still contracted to WWF around this time, which meant he frequently had to leave his duties in ECW in order to fulfill his commitment to Vince McMahon. This also had the positive impact of ECW fans being able to see an active WWF wrestler at their local shows, giving an air of legitimacy that Todd Gordon and Eddie Gilbert had strived for. The connections Eddie Gilbert had with other wrestlers and promoters meant that he was able to secure a slot on Sports Channel Philadelphia, who agreed to pay to air ECW from April. With this greater ability to reach new fans came a desire to bringing more recognisable faces to their brand. This period saw ex-WWF alumni such as Jim the Anvil Neidhart appearing in the Eastern Championship ring. Possibly the most important figure to appear in the company at this time.
Our very first ever television show. First one ever aired. Terry was color commentator and I came out at the end, and he stood there and he put his arm around me and he said, and I quote, "Well, this wasn't a very good TV show, but we'll get better."
Was Terry Funk, an industry stalwart and a wealth of knowledge that would prove invaluable over the next few years.
It is a toilet. It's a big empty warehouse. That's all it is.
So, Todd Gordon had surrounded himself with people that were more knowledgeable. He had put on a string of shows and was beginning to gather local momentum. He needed a better location to host these more recognisable names and somewhere that the company could call home. In 1993, ECW gained the rights to begin putting on wrestling cards at the world's most famous bingo hall.
It was the most exciting wrestling building I've ever been in my life.
The Viking Arena on the corner of South Swanson Street and West Rittner Street in Philadelphia. The venue was small and, although relatively new, felt run down and a little dirty. The streets outside were bare, and you could easily be forgiven for walking past the arena and not even noticing it there at all. However, this unassuming building would prove to be one of the breeding grounds for ECW's coming revolution, and is widely regarded as one of the birthplaces of hardcore wrestling in the United States. As you queue along this bare wall, waiting to go through the simple front doors, you may even begin to second guess why you had even bothered to show up. But once you entered through those doors, everything changed. A lot of people put it down as just a bingo hall, but to us it never was. We'd show up at the arena and the ring was in place, the chairs were set up and we'd be ready to go. The only time we ever noticed that it was a bingo hall was after the shows, when we'd be tearing the place down and you'd look over and see a line of old ladies waiting for us to finish so they could start their games. When filled to the rafters with bloodthirsty ECW hardcore fans, this mere bingo hall was transformed into a gladiatorial arena, fit to host some of the most brutal and industry-changing events of all time. The Viking Hall soon became informally known as the ECW Arena, as the connection between the wrestlers, fans, and the venue began to prove vital for the company's success.
If Paul tells you that it's sunny outside, you better get your damn umbrella before you leave the house.
While still a teenager, Paul Heyman used his persuasive skills to gain backstage access to a worldwide wrestling federation event at Madison Square Garden under the pretense of being a photojournalist. His talent behind the camera caught the attention of the company, and they compensated him for several of his photographs. During a Jim Crockett Promotions taping, Heyman encountered Dusty Rhodes and joined a production meeting, where he seemed to have made a lasting impression. This led him to contact Jim Crockett, initially gaining exposure on the Northeast Independent Circuit. Shortly after, he embarked on a more prominent venture with Championship Wrestling from Florida in February of 1987. Joining forces with Eddie Gilbert and his wife, valet Missy Hyatt, they engaged in a heated rivalry with Jerry Lawler before transitioning to the Alabama-based Continental Wrestling Federation. Behind the scenes, Gilbert held the position of head booker, with Heyman assuming the role of his assistant. Eddie was a mentor, and I was Eddie's protege. The difference in our philosophies was Eddie was always influenced by and wanted to recreate angles that he saw in Memphis many years earlier. So this is what Jerry Lawler did in '77 with Jackie Fargo. This is what Bill Dundee did with Buddy Landel. And he would want to put a different spin or twist on it, but essentially he just wanted to do things that he had seen growing up.
We met Paul when we were in Memphis in 1988. When Eddie got the booking job in Continental Wrestling, which is Alabama, I begged Eddie to bring Paul down as manager.
Simultaneously, Heyman also served as the head booker for Windy City Wrestling in Chicago, where he began to form a reputation as an innovative television writer and producer. In 1988, Heyman made the jump to Jim Crockett Promotions once again. He resumed his managerial duties, overseeing the original Midnight Express in a fierce feud against the new Midnight Express of Bobby Eaton and Stan Lane, along with their manager Jim Cornette. Additionally, he took on the task of managing Mean Mark Callis. Gradually transitioning, Heyman found himself comfortable in the role of an announcer, collaborating with Jim Ross to provide commentary for matches on WTBS World Championship Wrestling and various other programs. Following his departure from WCW, Heyman endeavored to establish a new wrestling promotion in Texas alongside Jim Crockett Jr. However, disagreements emerged as Crockett aimed to construct a traditional wrestling brand, while Heyman firmly believed that traditional wrestling was outdated and in need of a fresh approach. I always felt tasked to do something new and different and never done before. First time ever. A different approach, a new twist on things. So that was the only conflict that we really had. Eddie wanted to rehash but update, and I wanted to start from a blank piece of paper and make things up from the get-go. Heyman was later brought into ECW by Gordon and Gilbert in order to help train up new wrestlers in the arts of microphone magic, and also as a commentator for their weekly television shows going forward. Heyman also managed Jimmy Snuka and a host of other ECW talents on screen. And as we'd seen, from his meteoric rise from such a young age, Heyman was driven by success and power. The second he walked through the doors at ECW, he set to work making himself the most important man in the company. In Paul Heyman, ECW had now gained a wrestling mind, but it still needed to find its voice.
Paul got me an audition, and shortly thereafter, like a month later, Paul got the book, and the first change he made was to make me the play-by-play man.
Joey Styles began his career in professional wrestling as an announcer while he was still a student at Hofstra University. He got his start with Tony Capone's North American Wrestling Alliance. During this time, he would often share announcing duties with former WWE announcer Craig DeGeorge, or collaborate with him as a two-man commentary team. Additionally, Styles hosted a segment called NAWA Superstar Stats, where he provided insights into the wrestlers and their achievements.
I had decided that I wanted to be a professional wrestling television announcer for my career, despite what my parents thought and my teachers thought and what pretty much all but one of my friends thought. That was my silly dream.
The NAWA was briefly televised on Sports Channel America, which is now NBC Sports Network. In 1992, Styles crossed paths with a man named Paul E., which would prove to be the most significant encounter of his wrestling career.
Welcome back to Eastern Championship Wrestling. I am Joey Styles in the ECW Control Center.
Paul told me to come to ECW for a tryout, but but Paul wasn't the executive producer or booker, he was just a talent. His friend Eddie Gilbert was the booker and Todd Gordon was the owner. Unfortunately, Paul didn't tell anyone that he offered me the tryout because he had no business doing it, and I showed up in Philly. I found the building, started getting dressed backstage, and I was in my tighty-whities when Todd Gordon walked up to me. Todd asked, "Who are you?" And I told him I was there for the announcing audition, and he said, "I own ECW and don't know a thing about it. What the hell are you doing in my building?" And that was the start of my career with ECW. At first, Styles worked backstage organising and promoting events, but it was his passion in front of the audience which he wanted to provide his skills at. When Paul was in the office, I showed him a tape of the only independent show I had announced. It was at Mount Vernon High School in New York, and it was in June of 1992, and between my junior and senior years of college. It was called the North American Wrestling Alliance, and Hercules and Tony Atlas were the veterans on the card. Taz was doing a Tasmaniac character with no shoes, long hair and his face painted. The pretty boy, Tommy Dreamer, was wearing these ridiculous sequin suspenders, baggy pants and a robe that his mum had made. Sean Waltman was there as the Lightning Kid, so there was a lot of talent there. I was a heel colour commentator, and I made history by becoming the worst colour commentator ever. Although he was fresh-faced and with little in the way of experience, Joey Styles showed that he had a passion for pro wrestling and a willingness to improve and grow under Heyman's tutelage. Paul saw a young, smart-mouthed New Yorker, and he thought, "I'm going to create my own announcer in the mould of Gordon Soley, who can be the straight man in the middle of all of this chaos." Paul made me his choice and he trained me. He had been trained to announce in WCW by Jim Ross. When Paul trained me, he told me specifically, "Everything I'm telling you was told to me, word for word, by Jim Ross. So I'm training you the way that Jim Ross trained me."
Joey was a different kind of announcer. Nobody had really ever done what he did. I mean, he's the only person that I know that could single-handedly do an entire pay-per-view without a color commentator.
On June the 19th, 1993, Joey Styles made his first appearance at the electrifying Super Summer Sizzler Spectacular event held in Philadelphia. Styles took on the role of the exclusive host for the ECW Hardcore TV, serving as the sole announcer during the initial phase of the show. He skillfully provided play-by-play commentary and insightful colour analysis for both television and pay-per-view broadcasts going forward, infusing the programs with his extensive wrestling expertise, infectious enthusiasm, and impeccable comedic timing. Jimmy Snuka and Terry Funk, prominent wrestlers in Eastern Championship Wrestling, established unofficial connections between the company and the National Wrestling Alliance, a long-standing wrestling organisation which facilitated collaborations amongst various wrestling companies in the United States. Eddie Gilbert believed that ECW joining the NWA would be a significant milestone for the company, as the NWA's tradition and history would enhance the prestige of their newly formed brand. However, Paul Heyman and Todd Gordon vehemently disagreed. The National Wrestling Alliance was old school when old school wasn't hip anymore. We wanted to set our mark. We wanted to break away from the pack. We wanted to let the world know that we weren't just some independent promotion. These differing opinions led to intense and prolonged arguments amongst the three men. Initially, their disagreements stemmed from their passion for the wrestling business. However, over time, the situation grew more sinister. Eddie Gilbert, despite his amazing talents as a wrestler and promoter, struggled with severe mental health issues and substance abuse problems during this period. His erratic behaviour became unbearable for Gordon, resulting in a major falling out just before the Ultra Clash event on September the 18th, 1993. As a consequence, Gordon removed Gilbert from his position as head booker of the company. Eddie Gilbert's final moments in ECW came amidst the typical conflict with the promotion's owner, leaving both parties feeling betrayed and aggrieved by the other. It all came down to power. Paul wanted to be the boss. He wanted Eddie's job. From that point onward, Paul Heyman assumed creative control of ECW. The day I ended up becoming a partner in ECW, let alone the day I became the sole owner of ECW, it was on death's door. I came in and I took over creative in September of 1993. Todd Gordon couldn't pay me because he had bled himself dry paying Eddie Gilbert. I came in and I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll come in for half, I'll work for free." A year later, ECW became the flagship promotion of the struggling NWA. The NWA World Title Tournament, slated for August 1994, was scheduled to be held at an ECW-hosted event, primarily featuring ECW wrestlers to determine the NWA World Heavyweight Champion. At this event, a pivotal moment occurred that would forever alter the trajectory of the company and reshape the pro wrestling landscape for the next 2 decades.
We knew we had them and we knew we had the internet marks. What I didn't know was how vehemently and how profoundly we had changed and altered the business in the United States at that time.
In 1994, Jim Crockett's non-compete agreement with Ted Turner, who had acquired World Championship Wrestling from Crockett in November of 1988, reached its expiration. Crockett made the decision to return to promoting with the National Wrestling Alliance. He approached Todd Gordon and proposed organising a tournament for the prestigious NWA World Heavyweight Championship in ECW's hometown of Philadelphia, scheduled for August the 27th, 1994. However, then NWA President Dennis Coralluzzo accused Crockett and Gordon of attempting to monopolise the title, drawing parallels to Crockett's past actions in the 1980s. To address these concerns, Coralluzzo personally oversaw the tournament, since Crockett lacked the approval of the NWA board.
Well, Memphis, it's your old pal Dennis Coralluzzo again.
Offended by Coralluzzo's power moves, Gordon began contemplating a controversial and public plan to succeed ECW from the NWA, aiming to draw attention to ECW whilst disrespecting the NWA organisation. The intended outcome was that for the then ECW champion Shane Douglas to win the tournament and subsequently denounce the NWA in its supposed tradition during a post-match speech. Paul Heyman conspired with Douglas and Gordon, keeping the plan strictly confidential. In the speech, Douglas vehemently attacked the lineage of the NWA title, dramatically disregarding the belt and proclaiming the NWA as the dead organisation, asserting the significance of his ECW title at a world-level championship. Asserting the significance of his ECW title as a world-level championship. I stand here before God and my Father in heaven tonight, as I said I would be World Heavyweight Champion, in the tradition of Lou Thez, in the tradition of Jack Briscoe, the Briscoe brothers, of Dory Funk Jr., of Terry Funk, the man who'll never die, as the real nature boy Buddy Rogers upstairs tonight. From the Harley races to the Barry Windhams to the Ric Flairs, I accept the heavyweight title. Of Kerry Von Erich, of the fat man himself, Dusty Rhodes, this is it tonight, Dad. God, that's beautiful. And Ricky Steamboat, and they can all kiss my ass, because I am not the man who accepts a torch to be handed down to me from an organisation that died RIP 7 years ago. The franchise Shane Douglas is the man who ignites the new flame of the sport of professional wrestling. This shoot screwjob angle was known only to the 3 individuals involved. ECW successfully surprised the NWA with this move, to the extent that Coralluzzo even recorded an interview for ECW television without realising he was inadvertently playing into their hands. That was always our goal, to transform it from a bingo hall while at the same time expand ourselves. We were determined to shake up the industry. That was our goal. That was what we were doing. During that same week, Heyman and Todd Gordon rebranded the promotion, dropping the regional label Eastern and declared it as Extreme Championship Wrestling. I thought that the business, the industry, the presentation needed to change, in the same way music had changed, because music was all about Poison and Motley Crue and Winger and all these hair bands, and then along came Nirvana, and bam, the whole industry changed. So in the same way, I thought wrestling needed to change, in that wrestling had become the equivalent of hair bands, and we needed wrestling's version of Nirvana to come along and just shake everything up. They severed ties with the NWO, establishing ECW as an independent entity. Heyman encouraged wrestlers to express their genuine feelings about other wrestling promotions such as WWF, the NWA and WCW on television. In May 1995, Heyman bought out Todd Gordon's shares, becoming the sole owner of ECW, a move which was as much of a creative risk as a financial one.
Sabu wrestles hurt. Sabu wrestles with broken ribs. Sabu wrestles with a broken jaw. Sabu dives through tables. He is suicidal. He is homicidal. He is genocidal. And he defies any man in this sport today to work harder than him. And the only people in this sport today that work harder than Sabu cannot be found in WWF, cannot be found in WCW, cannot be found in New Japan or All Japan. The hardest working wrestler in the world today is the embodiment of the concept of ECW. And that is a concept we want to bring to Japan, because in Japan, the people respect work ethic. The people respect hard work. And the people know, if you work hard for me, I will pay to see you. Thank you very much.
It's the experience of being in that arena. It's that arena itself. It's the energy that's there. It's the fun that's had. It's the fact that people at 6 o'clock at night in the rain will stand out there, and when Ron and Charlie come with the cameras, they'll sit there and go, "It's raining, I'm making them open up the fucking doors." They see the camera and they go, "ECW! ECW!" It's a thing, man. It's an experience. They're living something, and once they don't live it, we don't want it.
One of the core components of the success of Extreme Championship Wrestling was undoubtedly its fans, passionate, loyal, and willing to support the new direction of the company with their attendances, their participation in the atmosphere, and most importantly, their cash. The ECW fanbase played a pivotal role in shaping the promotion's distinct identity. Unlike mainstream wrestling promotions at the time, ECW offered a unique product that catered to a more mature and hardcore audience. The fans actively embraced this rebellious spirit, which was characterized by its edginess, extreme matches, and a willingness to push the boundaries. Their unwavering support for ECW's brand of wrestling not only validated the promotion's vision, but also emboldened the performers to continue innovating and taking risks to satiate their audience hunger for adrenaline-fueled entertainment.
They're sitting on the edge of their seats. But if you're over, then you're over. No matter what you do, you're good.
I think ECW itself was a gimmick. I think getting the audience to chant ECW was really something. I don't care if you draw 70,000 people in a dome for WrestleMania, nobody chants WWE. The only time you ever hear anyone chant WCW, it's always followed by the word sucks. I was on 57th Avenue in New York City, and there was a 3-car pileup, and a bunch of people looked at the car wreck and started chanting ECW. It's become a part of the country's lexicon. It's an accepted, acknowledged phrase. For us to have built that from a bingo hall and then extended it out is really something. For us to accomplish that is really my favourite gimmick.
And there's times when I sat back and went, what am I doing? And I'm literally killing my body.
The fans of ECW were not just passive observers, they were active participants in the promotion's financial success. ECW operated on a smaller budget compared to its mainstream counterparts, relying heavily on ticket sales and merchandise to sustain its operations. The unwavering dedication of the fans ensured sold-out shows and a steady stream of revenue that kept the promotion just barely afloat. By purchasing tickets, merchandise, and pay-per-view events, the fans demonstrated their commitment to the survival of the company. This financial support would supposedly allow ECW to invest in its talent, production values, and overall growth, thereby establishing a sustainable model for the wrestling industry. In a defining moment, a chaotic battle unfolded between Cactus Jack, Terry Funk, Flyboy Rocco Rock, and Johnny Grunge of the Public Enemy. However, what followed the intense brawl would etch itself as an iconic moment in the annals of ECW, one that wouldn't be possible without the fans. As Funk urged members of the audience to hurl a chair into the ring, little did he know that he was about to witness the true extent of the ECW faithful's dedication. With fervent enthusiasm, the passionate crowd eagerly complied, launching a barrage of steel chairs from all angles, transforming the canvas into a sea of metal and leaving Funk momentarily disorientated. This pivotal moment marked the genesis of ECW's reputation as the renegade force within sports entertainment, captivating audiences far and wide.
These fans felt like they were part of the show, and the wrestlers felt that the fans were part of what they did. There was no disconnect.
Paul Heyman would regularly come out at the start of shows to rile up the crowd with speeches of violent mayhem and debauchery, every word flying from his mouth accompanied by spit, and a sense that Paul Heyman really did believe what he was saying to the fans and the wrestlers backstage. When Paul made his speeches, you truly wanted to go to war for him. Every ECW wrestler was willing to die in battle for the company. I don't mean that figuratively, but we were ready to do whatever it took for the world to notice us. Fans of ECW were instrumental in creating an atmosphere that remains unmatched in professional wrestling to this day. Their passion, energy and vocal engagement transformed events into electric spectacles. They weren't passive viewers, they were an active part of each and every show, which for some people is not necessarily a good thing. Their chants, jeers and cheers echoed throughout the arenas, elevating the in-ring action to new heights. The connection between the fans and the performers was symbiotic, with each feeding off of each other's energy. The unique ECW chants like ECW and ECW became synonymous with the promotion, further illustrating the fans' impact on shaping the atmosphere and making it an unforgettable experience.
The ECW crowd was so passionate. It was like the more you bled or the more tables you went through, the bigger a hero you were.
I never looked at ECW as wrestling. I always considered it more of a theology. I don't know whether I had or didn't have a messiah complex during that time, but I bought into the movement as much as, if not more than, anybody else. If I sold anyone on the religion of extreme, I was its #1 customer. ECW's passionate fanbase didn't just consist of individuals attending live events, it extended beyond the arenas. The fans formed a vibrant and tightly knit community that shared their love for ECW through various online platforms, fan clubs and conventions. This sense of community created lasting bonds among ECW enthusiasts, fostering a collective sense of belonging and shared experience. The fans' dedication transcended the boundaries of wrestling, demonstrating the enduring power of ECW's impact on their lives.
11 months ago, the pay-per-view distributor took on a product that everybody in this country said was too violent, was too sexual, was too risque for pay-per-view.
Tommy Dreamer, one of the original pioneers of the Extreme brand, initially faced disdain from the passionate ECW faithful due to his upbeat good guy persona. However, it was in August of 1994 that Dreamer earned the respect and admiration of the tough Philly crowd in a Singapore cane match against the relentless Sandman. Despite enduring excruciating lashings that left his back lacerated and adorned with welts, Dreamer displayed unwavering resilience. Refusing to beg for mercy, he turned to his aggressor and uttered the now iconic words,
"Thank you, sir. May I have another?"
In that transformative moment, Dreamer transcended into a hardcore icon, embodying the spirit of ECW and epitomizing what it took to become a star in the company. The stark contrast between Dreamer's journey in ECW and that of his rivals in WWF became apparent. The ECW fans had outright rejected Dreamer initially, demanding that he prove he was not merely a reflection of WWF in 1994, but a symbol of the future of ECW. Dreamer's transformation exemplified the counterculture's ethos of ECW, where authenticity and a willingness to push the boundaries were paramount. Dreamer's resilience and unwavering dedication to the company's extreme philosophy resonated with fans, solidifying his place as a beloved figure within the promotion. I was actually handed a switchblade one time, which I then used on Raven to slice open his forehead. I was handed dildos, boat oars, stuff wrapped in barbed wire, cheese graters, a carton of eggs, food which I would usually eat before I used it, tobacco spit, soda. The fans were such a big part of the show. We used to fight in the crowds and people would see the guys really beating the hell out of each other.
I've been wrestled about 9. I've had about 10 concussions in the last year and a half. Broken ribs, broken bones in my hand, herniated discs, all that shit.
During one harrowing encounter with Terry Funk on April 15, 1995, Mick Foley's character Cactus Jack became aware of a sign held by a fan in the front row that read "Cane Dewey," a callous message specifically targeting Cactus Jack's young son. Consumed by a mix of rage and indignation, the formidable competitor unleashed a series of impassioned diatribes, deriding the various essence of hardcore wrestling and admonishing the audience for relishing in his personal suffering. These unforgettable moments were later held by Paul Heyman as some of the most exceptional sports entertainment interviews ever captured on television. While undeniably entertaining, they were rooted in a raw truth. Mick Foley himself admitted, "Yeah, but the odd thing is I wasn't immediately angry about the sign. In fact, in fairness to the guy who made it, he actually asked me if it would be okay. But decided to cut the show's now infamous Cane Dewey promo when he saw his wife's reaction as what she saw as wrestling gone too far. I think he showed me the sign a week before he debuted it at the ECW arena. I kind of shrugged and said, yeah, that's fine. It wasn't until I told my wife and she said, I'm sorry, I just got sick to my stomach. You realise somebody is making a sign advocating the physical abuse of a 3-year-old child. I thought she had a pretty valid point. It's not a very positive sign for anyone to be carrying. Although this ultra-violent approach had endeared ECW to its hardcore local audience, in order to make the company a success, they needed advertisers and television networks to pay them for their product. With blood, guts and gore on almost every show, this was proving to be difficult for Paul Heyman to arrange. In August of 1995, Heyman once again displayed his tactical brilliance by reaching out to professional wrestlers who excelled in technical prowess and focused solely on the art of skillful high-flying maneuvers. This approach had fallen out of favour in mainstream wrestling for a considerable time, making it a risky move for the person in charge, especially since the extreme aspect of ECW seemed to overshadow the wrestling aspect. Nonetheless, Heyman's decision proved that ECW was more than just about unbridled brutality. Dean Malenko and Eddie Guerrero, two exceptional competitors, left the Philadelphia fans awestruck with their lightning-fast matches, showcasing a unique hybrid style of Mexican and Japanese wrestling never before witnessed in mainstream wrestling in the United States. To fill the void left by their departure, ECW introduced American wrestling fans to exhilarating Mexican luchadors like Rey Mysterio and Psychosis. At the time, these high-flying stars were deemed too small by WCW and WWF.
Philadelphia, don't be played for fools! There's only one wrestling promotion that is truly raw! There's only one wrestling promotion that's hotter than a stick of TNT Nitro! There's only one wrestling promotion that is the rudest, the lewdest, the crudest, the most insane, the most severe, the hottest form of sports entertainment legal in the United States today! There's only one wrestling promotion that truly takes it to the extreme, and there's only one wrestling promotion that is Philadelphia's hometown wrestling promotion, ECW, Philadelphia's homemade, hometown, home team, ECW, Philadelphia's wrestling promotion.
Heyman leveraged his connections to the NWA and WCW, bringing in promising pro wrestlers with untapped potential. Among these impressive younger talents was Steve Austin, who joined Heyman's fold in November of '95. Austin had recently been released by WCW due to an injury, but found solace and opportunity working under his former manager from the Dangerous Alliance days. Given the freedom to express himself fully on television, Austin, a frustrated competitor, unleashed scathing criticisms towards Eric Bischoff, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair and others. While Austin only competed in 2 matches during his time in ECW, it was his unforgettable interviews that played a pivotal role in shaping his future persona as Stone Cold. Eric Bischoff, the former president of WCW, revealed that Brian Pillman was released from his contract with the company with the intention of allowing him to join ECW at this time and refine the character he was developing as the loose cannon. Brian was very proactive and constructive in his approach to it. This was when he and I started talking about what to do with his character and how to utilise him in a different way. The plan was for Pillman to then return to WCW with his persona, contributing to the company's desired level of unpredictability on their Monday Nitro show. Unfortunately, things didn't unfold as anticipated for Bischoff. On February the 17th, 1996, Pillman made a surprising debut at Extreme Championship Wrestling's Cyber Slam event, much to the delight of the Philadelphia crowd, who had greeted him with an uproarious cheer. However, in a testament to Pillman's talent as a performer, he managed to quickly turn that enthusiastic audience against him through the use of a venomous promo. In a matter of minutes, he threatened to urinate in the centre of the ring, shifting the crowd's sentiment. Although Pillman made a few more appearances for ECW, he ultimately decided to sign with the World Wrestling Federation in June, turning the whole deal with Eric Bischoff on its head and for a brief spell coming out on top. It was there that he would conclude his career in professional wrestling before his life came to a tragic and sudden end. We will never get to see what could have been with one of the most promising performers of his generation, but we will always have Brian Pillman's energy and passion for pro wrestling perfectly displayed during his time in ECW.
Fuck him, let him go. If he's not happy, if they're not happy, go. So I don't fear talent raids because I have enough confidence in who we have that they'll stay. They don't want to stay, they don't have to stay. I don't want to hold anybody here that don't want to be here. I certainly wouldn't want to work in a place where I was forced to work. I've been through that. No, thank you. If they want to stay here, they're more than welcome to stay. If they want to go, God bless them. Go make your money elsewhere. See if you can duplicate what we do.
When Steven Richards and the Blue Meanie begun making their names in front of the rabid ECW crowd, they did so by parodying famous pop and rock bands as they made their entrances to the ring. Most memorably, the pair performed a rendition dressed as the Jackson 5 and infamous glam rock band Kiss. The response was much greater than anyone behind the scenes could have predicted. The group were greeted by Bubba Ray Dudley backstage after the event, who remarked that their work was superb and that he'd love to see them parody the biggest thing in wrestling at the time, which of course brings us to the NWO, or in this case, the BWO. After seeking the permission from ECW owner Paul Heyman and agreeing with Raven to part ways, at November to Remember 1996 inside of the ECW arena, the Blue World Order originally featured Stevie Richards as Big Stevie Cool, a parody of Kevin Nash, the Blue Guy, whose take on the bad guy Scott Hall was made all the hilarious by their opposing visual appearance, and rounding off the trio was Hollywood Nova, filling the role of Hulk Hogan. The group would eventually feature Thomas the Inchworm as Dennis Rodman, 3.5 a clever pun on 6's character, and the aptly named Stink, the BWO's answer to WCW main eventer Sting. Stevie Richards quickly became the standout of the group and was pushed heavily throughout this time, making it into the main event scene and challenging for the ECW World Heavyweight title. However, after suffering a serious injury at the hands of Terry Funk when he landed awkwardly on the guardrails, Richards was forced to temporarily step away from ECW in order to recover. In his absence, the group had lost their frontman and eventually collapsed in 1998. This would not be the end for the BWO, however. What was created for a single show and massively outperformed its expectations created a small but lasting legacy within the pro wrestling landscape. It may just be a silly parody based off childish humour and slapstick, but something about this wacky group dressed up in blue endured. In 2005, when WWE had bought the rights to the ECW brand and put on their One Night Stand pay-per-view, the BWO were reunited to the delight of wrestling fans in the era. Joey Styles proclaimed when the group made their entrance, "If any gimmick never deserved to make a dime and made a boatload of cash, this was it. And the best part is that they couldn't sue us, because it's a parody." Over the next couple of years, the BWO featured as a team against groups such as the Mexicools.
Fat boy! You fat ass in a blue shirt!
Their most famous incident came when JBL tracked down the Blue Meanie during a mass brawl in the ring and attacked the smaller man for real. This left the Blue Meanie in a right state, bleeding from his nose and mouth, with the crowd wondering what they had just witnessed. It came to light that Blue Meanie had legitimately stood up to JBL backstage after the pair were involved in an altercation which ended with the Meanie calling JBL a locker room bully. This drew the angered reaction from JBL at the ECW show, which proved that he was in fact a bully, just as the Meanie had proclaimed. This led to BWO taking on JBL in a no disqualifications match, in which Stevie Richards almost took JBL's head off with a sickening chair shot, and Blue Meanie got the win. This real-life drama could not serve to elevate the group, unfortunately, and they silently faded away from TV appearances before being released by WWE. Since 2010, the Blue World Order has featured sporadically in various iterations over the years. Different members of the group have reunited in the US, Europe and Japan, and have gone on to appear in TNA, Shakara and One Pro Wrestling in the UK. To add to the already ridiculous nature of these mind-bending factions' comings and goings, we even saw a fake Blue Meanie featured at TNA Hardcore Justice in 2010 under the name of the Blue Tilly. In ECW, I was in a company where everybody wanted to be a shoot fighter, or everybody was mad or hardcore. But the BWO, the Blue World Order, was the entertainment part of the show. Personally, my body would not be able to handle the risks of being strictly a hardcore wrestler. The way you learn how to work is you learn how to entertain, along with taking the physicality aspect of it, finding the balance, instead of being one end of the spectrum or another. But you can go even further than that. Just as the original NWO had spawned a Japanese variant, so did the BWO, when at ECW Barely Legal, Taka Michinoku, Terry Boy and Dick Togo were rebranded as BWO Japan and came out in their very own versions of the classic branded t-shirt. Whilst I explain this, you will have to bear with me, as it gets rather convoluted. The Blue World Order Japan was a parody of New World Order Japan, an offshoot brand of their American counterparts, whilst also being a direct reference to the original BWO from their interactions on ECW programming, and the fact that they took their name directly from said group. The BWO is a parody of the original Hogan, Nash and Hall brand of NWO, meaning that the BWO Japan, although only briefly, existed as a parody of a wrestling group from 4,000 miles across the globe. Although their brief run in ECW, which for a while saw them referred to as BWO International, only lasted a short while, they faced off against the Great Suzuki, Gran Hamada and Gran Nanawa, and had their most notable showings at ECW's first ever pay-per-view, Barely Legal, in 1997. The members of the group found themselves signed to a contract with WWE shortly after. Their debuts on Raw saw them briefly named Club Kamikaze, before being rebranded as Kai and Tai when they were joined by their manager Yamaguchi-san. Shortly after, they were joined by Taka Michinoku before Yamaguchi, Togo and Taiyo left the company, leaving behind Funaki and Michinoku to perform as a tag team. Funaki said, "We were always thinking about how we could stay in WWE for a long time. We were so small in WWE size-wise. We needed to think how to make ourselves valuable. We thought about what looks good, how to speak better English, all sorts of things." On October the 26th, 1996, at the ECW Arena, the Sandman achieved a triumphant defense of the ECW Championship by defeating Too Cold Scorpio. This is the most horrifying thing I have ever seen in my life. This time he was speaking for a large chunk of the Christians in the United States. Paul Heyman was all for pushing the boundaries and attempting to find the limits of what was acceptable. It's probably the only night in ECW history where we ever had to apologise for what we did. I didn't just want to do a wrestling show, I wanted to do great television. Raven was made to go out and make sure that the fans knew it was all a show and cover the possible damages with an apology. However, it wasn't just the television companies and advertisers Heyman was worried about offending. As part of his ongoing recruitment process, Paul Heyman had invited Olympic gold medalist Kurt Angle to attend their show, before he had ever had a chance to sign with the WWE. This would surely be the biggest potential signing for ECW to date, and it was crucial that Angle was impressed by the proceedings. Kurt Angle was supposedly so offended and disgusted by the ECW display that night that he refused to return for contract talks with Paul Heyman and would go on instead to sign and have an iconic career with Vince McMahon and the WWE. In the mid to late 90s, shocking entertainment, reality TV and gross-out humour were all the rage. As pro wrestling is often a reflection of popular culture in the US, we saw that these forms of segments became mainstays on wrestling programming. One company who took their name seriously and pushed things to the extreme were ECW, or Extreme Championship Wrestling. Known for their graphic violence and rabid fan base, ECW grew in popularity to a point where they began to plan their very first pay-per-view, which was to be titled Barely Legal. But before that show could take place, a real-life event occurred which, fittingly, proved to itself be barely legal. Known amongst wrestling fans simply as the mass transit incident. In Massachusetts, during an untelevised house show, ECW management were left short when a number of wrestlers who were advertised for the show didn't turn up on the day. Being a small show with fans who, by the day's standards, were extremely clued in on the inner workings of the business, the word of the no-shows began to spread before the first match even took place. In the crowd, a man who had always dreamt of one day stepping between the ropes realised that this could be the opportunity he had been waiting for. He made his way to the dressing area and announced his desire to be added into one of the slots on the card, the whole time boasting of his wrestling training and skills in the ring. He was very tall, extremely fat, and the promoters didn't have many other options. Given a bus driver's outfit for some unknown reason and brought to the ring under the moniker of mass transit, could this be a wrestling fairy tale come true? No. His opponents on the day were a team known as the Gangsters, one half of which was the notorious New Jack. As the match brawled around the fans, the time came for the dramatic finish to the bout. Mass Transit was directed to Blade and await a finishing move to be delivered by New Jack. However, Mass Transit whispered to New Jack that he wasn't confident enough to do the Blade job himself. This would turn out to be a mistake which would live long in wrestling infamy. New Jack, said to be in a bad mood due to dispute over pay, butchered his opponent's forehead and severed so much skin that Mass Transit began to bleed out. A horrific moment on its own, I'm sure you'll agree, but the worst is yet to come. With Mass Transit's family at ringside, it became known that not only had he never had a day of wrestling training in his life, but Mass Transit was also, in fact, underage. This led to a criminal case being brought against New Jack, a claim which he fought and won in court. However, it's said that with this event being made public knowledge, sponsors backed out of deals with ECW, and that led to delays and complications with their upcoming pay-per-view, something which potentially changed the course of the entire company's history forever. For me, at 10 years old, the coming together of two seemingly disconnected and rival wrestling companies blew my mind. However, the idea of an invasive set of wrestlers from a rival promotion was not a new idea by any means. Paul Heyman and Vince McMahon had already been working behind the scenes for years to bring ECW and WWE fans together.
Vince's curiosity with ECW started at the King of the Ring in Philadelphia.
When the King of the Ring event arrived in Philadelphia in 1995, the then home of explosive independent wrestling from Extreme Championship Wrestling, as the tournament reached its final stage between Savio Vega and Mabel, the crowd predictably turned against the match, loudly chanting ECW in unison. It is said that this was the first time Vince McMahon himself became aware of Extreme Championship Wrestling, which could be seen as somewhat surprising. Regardless, when the World Wrestling Federation returned the following year for the In Your House Mind Games pay-per-view, they capitalised on this incident. In the opening match of the show, Savio Vega faced off against Justin the Hawk Bradshaw, who would later become known as JBL. As the show went live, the arena reverberated with ECW chants even before Bradshaw made his entrance. Accompanied by Uncle Zebekiah, also known as Zeb Coulter or Dirty Dutch Mantell, Bradshaw entered the ring. Meanwhile, eagle-eyed viewers at home caught sight of some familiar faces in the front row: Tommy Dreamer, Paul Heyman and the Sandman. We didn't know what we were getting into. We all met up in the parking lot. We had the Eliminators in the crowd as backup in case we got into a fight. I found out later that Savio Vega was the only one who knew. Bradshaw didn't even know about it. He was ready to fight and Savio cut him off. The execution was anything but masterful, as these individuals were not so subtly featured on screen. It was during this moment that the Sandman, with a can of beer in hand, unexpectedly spat in Savio Vega's face whilst he was fighting outside the ring. WWF officials swiftly intervened, removing the ECW invaders, and the rest of the show proceeded without any issues. Following the controversial mass transit incident, which led to the cancellation of ECW's first pay-per-view, Paul Heyman managed to secure a deal that finally allowed the company to debut on pay-per-view in April 1997. Before this milestone, the partnership between ECW and WWF was reignited, starting on February the 17th, 1997 episode of Raw, the night after In Your House Final 4. During a match between Owen Hart and Flash Funk, formerly known as Too Cold Scorpio, Paul Heyman appeared on air via telephone and engaged in a kayfabe challenge with Jerry the King Lawler. Heyman accepted the challenge, agreeing to show up the following week at New York Manhattan Center. For the time being, it seemed like this would be the end of the interaction as ECW continued building towards their pay-per-view debut. While ECW's Barely Legal might not have appeared to be the most outstanding wrestling show on paper, the atmosphere, the passion of the competitors, and Paul Heyman's infamous pep talk before the event were unparalleled. The heat between the two promotions would intensify in the subsequent months when one of ECW's steadfast stars started appearing on WWF programming. Rob Van Dam, now calling himself Mr. Monday Night, formed a partnership with The King, betraying his ECW family. Regrettably, the ECW and WWE partnership quickly lost its momentum following a particular incident. During a Raw taping in Detroit, a scheduled match between Sabu and Flash Funk was marred by backstage disagreements or political issues. These complications resulted in the cancellation of a match that was supposed to feature Road Dogg against RVD. However, it is said that during this time, Vincent McMahon realised the potential of Paul Heyman as an insider on the independent wrestling scene, even going so far as to put Heyman on the WWF payroll in order to keep a close business relationship between the two companies, something which, as we will see, paid out immensely for both parties over the next 2 decades.
Нет, это Russian bear. Russian bear is incredible. Who could bodybuild with love? Not me.
Free bodybuilding program from Val Vasilif with purchase.
ECW Barely Legal 1997 was an event that nearly never happened. Held on April the 13th at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, it marked a pivotal moment for Extreme Championship Wrestling. Overcoming obstacles such as cable companies' refusal to associate with the controversial promotion and technical difficulties caused by the venue's limited power supply. Barely Legal secured a provider at the 11th hour. Despite these setbacks, the show pressed on, delivering an unforgettable spectacle that showcased the raw athleticism, brutality and devoted fanbase that forever changed the professional wrestling world. Under the visionary leadership of Paul Heyman, ECW had emerged in the late 1990s as a renegade promotion that shattered the conventions of traditional wrestling. Seeking to provide a grittier, more realistic product, ECW resonated with a growing contingent of fans who craved an alternative to the formulaic style offered by mainstream promotions at the time. Barely Legal 97 represented the culmination of this feeling and of ECW's journey as the company's first ever pay-per-view event. The defining characteristics of ECW Barely Legal 97 was the electric atmosphere inside the ECW arena that night. The passionate and rabid fan base the ECW had cultivated infused an unparalleled energy into that event. The fervour of the crowd, combined with the intimate venue, created an intense and immersive experience for both those in attendance and the viewers watching on television at home. Barely Legal boasted a stacked card featuring a mix of ECW regulars and notable talents from other promotions. The matches showcased the extreme style that had become synonymous with the brand, incorporating high-risk maneuvers, violent encounters, and an unprecedented level of intensity. The event marked a turning point not only for ECW, but also for the professional wrestling industry as a whole. The event's success, both critically and commercially, demonstrated the viability of the alternative wrestling scene and initiated a shift in the landscape. It laid the foundation for ECW's subsequent rise as a major player in the business, whilst inspiring other promotions to embrace a more innovative and daring style of wrestling. ECW Barely Legal 1997 stands as a landmark event in the history of the business.
ECW is a concept taken from what Terry Funk started many, many years ago. And that concept is, if the people pay their yen, their dollar, to see this event, they go home and say, that event was worth more than what I paid for it. I'm happy I spent my money on that event. If I spend 50,000 yen to come to the match, I would have spent 100,000 for that show.
In early 1998, Shane Douglas was still the reigning ECW World Champion and the top of the card within the company. However, when Douglas suffered an injury which meant he was unable to defend his belt, calls from other wrestlers in the company came for him to relinquish the championship. When Douglas refused, it caused frustration backstage, most notably with the number one contender Taz, who kept demanding the belt be passed to him. In May, Taz decided to take the problem into his own hands and came out to speak to the ECW fans about his rightful place as world champion. The original belt that Taz brought to the ring was simply the ECW television title with the leather strap changed. On close-up, you can even make out the stickers that Taz and backstage production used to cover the word television with FTW and Taz logos. Even later, when Taz was presented with a more professional belt by Rob Van Dam, the FTW Championship was not recognised as an official title by ECW or other wrestling promotions, but that was all part of the charm. Instead, it was referred to as a symbolic or unsanctioned championship. However, this would not stop Taz from constantly harassing the officially recognised champion, attempting to goad Shane Douglas into a match. With his intense persona and expert use of a countless number of suplexes, Taz endeared himself towards the rabid ECW regulars. The human suplex machine didn't care about any official title anymore and had broken away to find success on his own, a reflection of one of the core fundamentals of early ECW and a clear parallel to Shane Douglas's approach to the NWA belt a few years prior. However, the belt only ever served as a stepping stone for Taz and others who held it during this period. I don't think that if you go back into the history of ECW that the FTW world title meant that much. I think in the history of ECW, the FTW title was a launch towards Taz's push towards the World Heavyweight Championship. After crowning 3 champions during its initial run, the FTW belt was eventually abandoned in 1999 when it was unified with the ECW World Championship. For over 2 decades it remained inactive. However, in 2020, the FTW Championship found new life when it was reintroduced by Taz in AEW. Both in ECW and AEW, the championship was introduced when the respective world champions were unable to defend their titles due to injury or illness. In ECW, Taz himself was the challenger, while in AEW, it was Taz's client, Brian Cage. It carries a rebellious aura, signifying defiance against the established hierarchy. Taz's real-life son even had a run with the FTW belt in AEW, defeating Ricky Starks in 2022. ECW Heatwave 1998 is widely regarded as one of the most iconic and memorable events in the history of Extreme Championship Wrestling. Known for its intense and hardcore style, ECW Heatwave 1998 showcased the promotion at its peak and featured several standout matches and moments. Heatwave 98 was an exceptional event that showcased the very best of ECW's hardcore style and intense wrestling action to a much wider audience. It had a strong lineup of matches with standout performances from lots of wrestlers on the card. The event captured the spirit and energy of the company and left a lasting impression on fans of the promotion to this day, still being revered as an absolute classic.
ECW アメリカマット界の中で今最も注目を集める団体であるサブーン・サンドマンらが繰り広げるエクストリームなファイトでメジャーをも脅かす存在となったこの団体の仕掛け人がこの男である。
So, at this point in time, ECW had become the darlings of the independent wrestling scene across North America. The company had gained an aura of excitement, a brand with both eyes firmly on the future and with some of the brightest talents in the industry boasted on their ever-improving roster. Paul Heyman was leading ECW through one successful wrestling event, through weekly television and onto ever more popular pay-per-views. And the young wrestling genius was seemingly about to fulfill the potential that so many had seen in him from a young age. In 1999, Paul Heyman entered into a 3-year contract with TNN, aiming to raise national awareness of his company.
And indeed, starting Friday night, August 13th at 8 p.m., we're on TNN!
Extreme Championship Wrestling features extreme violence. The emphasis on violence is keeping ECW from gaining any local television outlets in syndication. Station managers are shying away from the brutality, leaving ECW to several regional sports channels and Channel America, the network of Channel 16. But Heyman is not fazed. If it's working with the fans, Paul will go with it, says Dave Meltzer. You may not like the amount of violence in the show, but those fans in Philadelphia do. In August of 1999, ECW made its national broadcast debut on the Nashville network, despite the absence of advertising or an increased production value. Prior to ECW on TNN, ECW events were only televised through syndication. TNN, looking to capitalise on the growing viewership of teenagers and young males attracted by Roller Jam.
Fear is his sacred weapon. Punishment, his true companion. Pain, his sole agenda. Mark D'Amato of the New York Enforcers is the most dangerous man on skates.
I am the dominant figure in this league. I run this league.
Added ECW to its Friday Night Thrill Zone. The addition of ECW supposedly contributed to a significant boost in the network's young male demographic on Friday nights in the early 2000s. Initially, this opportunity seemed like a chance for ECW to compete on a major scale. However, the deal turned out to be a nightmare as the network's involvement began to harm the product. The show Raw moved to TNN in September of 2000, coinciding with a major rebranding of the channel as the national network. During a live on-air promo, Paul Heyman expressed his displeasure with TNN, accusing them of neglecting his company by not promoting the show and threatening legal action. Despite rumours of a possible coexistence between WWE and ECW on TNN, 2 weeks later, Paul Heyman's company was cancelled. Heyman believed that TNN used ECW as a test run to gauge wrestling performance on the channel, a sentiment shared by former ECW wrestler Jerry Lynn. So now, Paul Heyman had lost his lucrative slot on national television and all of the financial stability that came with it. He could have cut back on the ECW roster at this time and saved cash on some of the larger contracts. He could have toned down the excessive production in his shows and saved money on pyro, flares and fireworks. Perhaps he could have gone into the bank and attempted to receive some kind of financial assistance. But instead, Paul Heyman made the most ingenious and logical next step imaginable. He went straight out and spent all of the rest of ECW's non-existent money, with no way of ever paying it back. We had enough in the budget to last us to the first major event that I completely scripted, which was the November to Remember. If that show didn't completely sell out, the promotion would have folded. That got us enough of a budget to last to February, which ended up being the night the line was crossed. If that show didn't sell out completely, and we sell a certain number of t-shirts and videotapes, we wouldn't have been open the next day. Literally, it was a struggle to survive every day. ECW has never had a broad-based syndicated television lineup because of its violent content, and has had to rely on regional sports, cable, and low-power networks to gain access to the US audience. Yet, the Extreme Circuit is perhaps the most loyal and rabid, albeit much smaller fan base of any mat organisation. Heyman took over 4 years ago from the late Eddie Gilbert as booker of the Philadelphia-based group, and immediately began playing to the band of hardcore fans who have predominantly cheered for villains for years. As part of that, ECW carved out a niche as an anything-goes circuit. Backstage brawl leads to firing of the Gangsters. Extreme Championship Wrestling's team of the Gangsters, who were part of that controversial race-baiting angle in Smoky Mountain Wrestling last year, were fired Friday night after a real-life backstage brawl in Jim Thorpe, Philadelphia. New Jack, half of the Gangsters team, allegedly began the brouhaha with ECW newcomer Dudley and reportedly took a baseball bat to Dudley. Eyewitnesses say eventually half the dressing room became involved. ECW booker Paul Heyman fired the Gangsters Wednesday. Let's hope ECW doesn't come here. Extreme Championship Wrestling, the small Philadelphia-based promotion of Paul Heyman, has turned into a cult favourite and played to 2 turnaway crowds, one in Queens, New York, and in the 1,500-seat bingo hall where ECW regularly calls home in Philly. However, the 2 sellouts come on the heels of another in the endless series of controversies involving this group. Less than 2 weeks ago in Allentown, Philadelphia, a melee erupted involving Shane Douglas and a fan. According to eyewitnesses, a fan took a swing at Douglas as he was leaving the ring. Moments later, several other fans became involved, and ECW's Bubba Ray Dudley and Tommy Dreamer were keeping fans separated from Douglas. Perry Saturn of the Eliminators tag team tackled one of the fans who had jumped Douglas. Heyman spent the following Monday issuing public statements attacking the Allentown Arena officials for providing inadequate security and suggesting that Douglas may press charges against the fan who originally swung at him. Earlier in the same show, a fan threw a drink at ECW's Rob Van Dam. Van Dam went after the fan and ripped his shirt off. I'm not surprised at any of this, nor will this be the last time these kind of wrestling fan confrontations occur. I'm periodically asked and receive email from people who want to know when ECW is going to be booked at a show in Columbus. I hope never. In my view, ECW has gone beyond the cutting edge. A minority of wrestling fans seem to enjoy this, but this is a slice of wrestling we don't need here. In January of 2001, the Extreme Championship Wrestling promotion was in a state of disarray. It was plagued by severe financial troubles resulting from poor business decisions, as well as the continuous departure of its top talent to rival companies WWE and WCW. The Guilty as Charged pay-per-view event, held on January 7, 2001 at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York, marked a significant turning point for the company. It would be the last event produced by Paul Heyman and the original ECW, and their home away from home in New York would serve as the perfect venue. It was a major league venue in the heart of Midtown Manhattan, and yet it had the same feel to me as the ECW arena during the height of the promotion. It was intimate enough to maintain that aura, and large enough to turn a tremendous profit and fund the company. Had ECW continued operations, the Hammerstein was going to become our base. This broadcast would serve as the final farewell to the beloved original cast and format of the company, as it would undergo major changes thereafter.
And for that, I promise you, we are guilty as charged!
The centerpiece of the event was a groundbreaking encounter, known as the Tables, Ladders, Chairs and Canes match, a first and only in the history of ECW. The match was fought for the prestigious ECW World Championship, with Steve Corino putting his title on the line against the Sandman and Just Incredible. In an astonishing turn of events, the Sandman emerged victorious, claiming the championship after climbing the ladder to claim the belt. However, his reign was short-lived, as he immediately faced a determined challenger in Rhino, who would come out and threaten Sandman's family if he wasn't given an immediate shot at the new ECW title. Surpassing all expectations, Rhino managed to dethrone the Sandman, delivering a wicked gore through a table, and seized the coveted ECW belt for himself. With the championship in his possession, Rhino issued an open challenge, inviting any worthy competitor to step forward. Rob Van Dam fearlessly answered the call, ready to test his mettle against the best. But before the encounter could unfold, Jerry Lynn ambushed Van Dam, igniting an impromptu clash between the two foes. In an intense showdown, Van Dam emerged triumphant, showcasing his resilience and skill. This electrifying confrontation epitomized the rebellious spirit that defined the Renegade Company, delivering a fitting conclusion to the era of the original and independent ECW. However, behind the scenes, things were completely falling apart. The nature of the impromptu match between RVD and Jerry Lynn was in fact due to a dispute over pay, with Paul Heyman yet again falling behind on his employees' contracts. There was a big controversy based on money between Lynn, Rob Van Dam and Paul Heyman about doing that final show. Jerry didn't even bring his boots because he was owed so much money. I believe he used Scotty Riggs' black boots and black biker shorts for the match. Initially, ECW had planned to present their next pay-per-view event, Living Dangerously, on March the 11th, signalling a reduction in their pay-per-view schedule. However, unforeseen circumstances abruptly altered these intentions. Surprisingly, the fate of ECW took an unexpected turn after a house show in Pines Bluff, Arkansas, which was held on January the 13th, unexpectedly becoming the promotion's final show ever without prior indication. As the weeks progressed, ECW encountered more setbacks. In February, news circulated that the highly anticipated Living Dangerously pay-per-view had been cancelled, leaving fans disappointed and uncertain about the future of the promotion. Then, on March the 5th, a bombshell announcement shook the wrestling world. Paul Heyman, the leader of ECW, stunned audiences by making a surprising appearance on Monday Night Raw. This unexpected development witnessed Heyman reunited with his former WCW colleague Jim Ross as he stepped in to replace Jerry Lawler, who had recently resigned from the WWF. Heyman's unexpected transition to Monday Night Raw left the wrestling industry, not to mention the ECW locker room, abuzz, with speculation, anger and intrigue surrounding implications for both ECW and the WWF. The surprising reunion of Heyman and Ross added another layer of anticipation and uncertainty to an already tumultuous period in professional wrestling. ECW goes too far with DUI stunt. What has my hackles in an uproar is a late in the show storyline involving ECW Sandman, who was injured while trying to interfere in the bout. Sandman was taken by ambulance to a hospital, but the script had Sandman taking the ambulance hostage on the way. While driving on the way back to the War Memorial Arena in Fort Lauderdale, ECW made an amateurish attempt to follow the ambulance via helicopter a la O.J. Simpson's Bronco. Sandman stopped off at a convenience store to pick up a couple of six-packs of beer. Announcers Joey Styles and Lance Wright repeatedly made comic reference to Sandman drinking while driving through the streets of Fort Lauderdale. Sandman is a popular performer with a large pack of ECW's followers. What kind of message does this send to them about the behaviour in a promotion where success is measured by the number of tables a wrestler can break in one night? I wonder how Dave Brown feels about something like this. Until January of this year, Brown was the long-term announcer of Memphis-based USWA Wrestling. You may remember detailing the death of his daughter and granddaughter in May at the hands of a drunk driver. Somehow, I don't think Dave Brown's laughing about ECW's storyline, particularly when he is becoming a public advocate for tougher DUI laws. At some point I have to wonder, is there no new low for pro wrestling?
There's this other brand out there, and why not incorporate it?
ECW had introduced a new and innovative style of professional wrestling that differed from mainstream promotions like WWE and WCW. It combined elements of traditional wrestling with high-flying maneuvers, hardcore, and a gritty, more realistic presentation. The extreme nature of the matches, along with the innovative storyline and characters, appealed to a niche audience looking for something different. The popularity of the company had begun to explode due to the prevalence of tape trading back at the time, and as the irons were red hot, Vince McMahon saw the opportunity to strike. On July the 9th, 2001, wrestling fans of Extreme Championship Wrestling witnessed one of the most dramatic moments in the history of the brand. The episode of Raw, which was held at the Phillips Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, featured a series of shocking events that changed the landscape of the company forever. The night started off innocently enough, with Kane scheduled to face Mike Awesome and Lance Storm in a handicap match. However, things took an unexpected turn when Chris Jericho came out and offered to be Kane's partner, turning it into a tag team match. Near the end of the bout, Jericho applied the Walls of Jericho on Lance Storm, but just as the crowd thought that Jericho and Kane had the upper hand, Rob Van Dam and Tommy Dreamer ran through the audience and into the ring, launching a surprise attack on Kane and Jericho. In response, WWE wrestlers consisting of the Dudley Boys, Taz, Just Incredible, Rhino and Raven ran to the ring to aid their WWF colleagues. After a brief standoff, the WWF cavalry turned around and attacked Kane and Jericho as the fans realised that they were all former ECW wrestlers, prompting Paul Heyman to leave the announce table and enter the ring. Heyman high-fived the wrestlers and announced that ECW has been brought into the invasion. And I feel like adding and injecting ECW into the mix and into the alliance, it made it more interesting for sure. Was it done perfectly? No. It wasn't, because it would have been much better if people that would have been viewing this program went, oh well, those are all different entities. There's WWE and they're taking on WCW along with ECW. But it really just seemed like now WCW and ECW were a part of WWE. And I think it just watered it down so much and took away so much of the dream appeal. Heyman talked about how he had grown tired of sitting beside Jim Ross and discussing WCW versus WWF, stating that he felt that everyone had forgotten about his company. He then announced that this invasion just got taken to the extreme. The shocking turn of events had the crowd on the edge of their seats, wondering what would happen next. At the end of the night, the WWF wrestlers entered the ring. The WCW wrestlers came into the ring, accompanied by Shane McMahon. And before ECW entered, the WCW and WWF wrestlers started to brawl. The WWF roster cleared the ring, but then were stormed by the ECW combatants and taken out. The WCW fighters then came into the ring, high-fived the ECW men, and then dismantled the WWF wrestlers, and announced that ECW and WCW merged to form the alliance, with Stephanie McMahon as ECW's new owner. This shocking announcement left fans in disbelief, and many wondered what would happen next in the world of wrestling. Many of the existing storylines were put on hold as the focus shifted to the rivalry between the WWF and the brand new alliance. I thought it was okay, considering it was, and I hated the way the invasion was played, where WCW didn't have its own show, it didn't have its own platform, and WCW guys were constantly on WWE programming. There was a point where every match was like WWE versus WCW, and I feel like it never had the feel of a dream feud or dream program that it should have had. For fans of ECW, news of their financial struggles going into the new millennium may have come as somewhat of a shock. After all, the company was putting on more wrestling events in bigger, more prestigious venues than ever before. They had managed a run of well-viewed and critically acclaimed pay-per-view shows, and were seemingly set to continue their meteoric rise. However, to anyone who had been unfortunate enough to engage in a business relationship with Paul Heyman at this time, the total collapse of the company was always only a matter of time. ECW had faced financial difficulties through its entire existence, but eventually in 2001, the magnitude of the debts accrued by Heyman and the company became apparent. ECW's financial struggles were primarily attributed to the high cost associated with running a professional wrestling promotion and the intense competition within the industry at the time. The company operated on a much smaller budget compared to its mainstream counterparts such as WWE and WCW. ECW relied heavily on its passionate fanbase and innovative storytelling to differentiate itself in the highly competitive wrestling landscape. Throughout the late 90s, ECW experienced significant growth in popularity and critical acclaim, largely due to its unique presentation and emphasis on a more extreme and gritty style of wrestling. However, the company struggled to convert its cult following into substantial financial success. Despite various television deals and pay-per-view events, ECW often faced challenges in securing consistent revenue streams. One of the major setbacks for ECW was losing its television deal with TNN in 2000. The loss of this national television exposure limited ECW's reach and ability to attract new viewers and sponsorship. This setback, combined with increasing debts, led to the company filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in April of 2001. Under Chapter 11 bankruptcy, ECW attempted to reorganise its finances and continue operations. However, the company faced insurmountable challenges and was unable to secure the necessary funding to sustain its operations. As a result, ECW's assets were stripped. Following the bankruptcy, WWE would involve themselves in a long process to acquire the rights to ECW's video library and intellectual property. During the bankruptcy proceedings, the financial reports from Paul Heyman and the ECW holding company HHG Corporation became public. This is where we see with undoubtable proof that Heyman's wise-talking, manipulating of the facts and risk-taking behind the scenes had hidden the true financial collapse of the company, as his borrowing had grown to astronomical levels. Alongside this money owed to RVD, the owner of ECW also owed Tommy Dreamer, Rhino, Shane Douglas, Francine, Don Callis, Super Crazy and some other wrestlers almost $300,000 in contractually obligated missed payments. Joey Styles, a passionate supporter of Heyman and a crucial part of the company's success, was personally owed more than $50,000. But it wasn't only the on-screen talent that had not been paid by ECW. Paul Heyman had made great strides towards increasing the production value of his live shows, but at a huge cost. He owed 9 different production companies in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Chicago and Atlanta, an amount totaling more than $500,000. He owed the owners of the Madison Square Garden venue $250,000. In total, HHG listed debts of $8,881,000, which doesn't include the unknown amounts owed to some workers or allowed for the settlement of the 13 pending lawsuits and other potential litigation. In 2004, after finally purchasing ECW's assets from a bankruptcy court, WWE released The Rise and Fall of ECW, which tells the wild story of the alternate promotion's carnal history. The documentary is such a success that WWE follows it up with ECW One Night Stand on pay-per-view. However, Vince McMahon was not the only one with the bright idea to pounce on the revived interest in the Extreme brand. In response to the Rise and Fall documentary, many ex-ECW wrestlers felt that they had not been given the chance to express their side of the story by WWE. After all, Vince McMahon's company had only used interviews from wrestlers they had signed on their roster at the time. The likes of Shane Douglas, Raven and Sandman had all been instrumental in the growing success of ECW, but were all absent in WWE's newly released documentary. So an unlikely figure emerged in order to shine a light on the other side of the company's past. Jeremy Borash, a man who started his career as a commentator in WCW and then went on to have successful spells with TNA and now WWE, stepped up. Alongside the Big Vision Entertainment Company, Borash not only produced the Forever Hardcore documentary, but to coincide with its release, began organising a wrestling reunion show. On June the 10th, 2005, the first ever hardcore homecoming event took place at the ECW Arena in Philadelphia, the spiritual home of ECW. This means that the event occurred just 2 days prior to the WWE's ECW One Night Stand 2005 show in New York City. Before the event, a fan tailgate party was organised outside the former ECW arena, with several wrestlers making appearances. This gathering harkened back to the 1980s era of territorial wrestling, when independent promotions would often host barbecues before and after the events. The main event of the show was a 3-way dance match between Shane Douglas, Terry Funk and Sabu. This match was highly anticipated as it showcased 3 of the most iconic figures in ECW's history. Other notable matches included a steel cage between Raven and the Sandman, a tag team match between the Dudley Boys of Bubba Ray Dudley and Devon and the Gangsters of New Jack and Mustafa Saeed, and a four-way dance match for the ECW World Television Championship. The event also featured several memorable moments and surprises, including the return of the former ECW owner Todd Gordon and the emotional tribute to ECW wrestler Chris Candido, who had passed away earlier that year. None of the former ECW performers who were under contract with WWE at the time appeared at the Hardcore Homecoming event. However, Mick Foley was not signed to the WWE, made a surprise appearance. The event featured former ECW ring announcers Bob RTC and Stephen DeAngelis, as well as a former ECW referee John Finnegan. Hardcore Homecoming received positive reviews from both fans and critics alike. It captured the very spirit and nostalgia of the original ECW, and provided an opportunity for fans to relive the excitement and passion of the hardcore wrestling era. In the annals of professional wrestling history, there are moments that stand out as transformative, forever altering the landscape of the industry itself. ECW One Night Stand 2005 is undoubtedly one of those landmark events. As a resurrected and nostalgic homage to Extreme Championship Wrestling, this pay-per-view was held in June of 2005 at the Hammerstein Ballroom in New York City, became a rallying cry for die-hard fans and a testament to the enduring legacy of the brand. Following ECW's closure in 2001 due to financial struggles, fans were left yearning for the unique experience it had offered. ECW had developed a loyal following that appreciated its unapologetic and boundary-pushing approach to pro wrestling. In the years that followed, a cult-like fervour grew amongst wrestling enthusiasts, creating a groundswell of nostalgia and a desire to see their beloved promotion resurrected, if even only for a night. The Hammerstein Ballroom was chosen as the venue for the event due to its historical association with the company. As fans entered the arena, they were greeted by an atmosphere brimming with energy and anticipation. The intimate setting, combined with raucous crowds, primarily composed of original ECW faithful, created an electric ambience that felt like a throwback to the promotion's glory days. Signs, chants, and a palpable sense of excitement permeated the air, setting the stage for an unforgettable evening. ECW One Night Stand 2005 brought together an impressive roster of ECW alumni, including icons such as Tommy Dreamer, Rob Van Dam, the Sandman, and Sabu. These superstars, known for their extreme in-ring style and unwavering dedication to entertaining fans, provided a bridge between the past and present, reminding fans of the innovative and groundbreaking performances that had defined ECW. Their presence injected a sense of authenticity and legitimacy into the event, making it a true tribute to the spirit of the promotion. The card for ECW One Night Stand featured a mix of classic ECW matches and confrontations between ex-alumni and representatives from WWE. These bouts exemplified the very essence of ECW, showcasing the extreme, high-risk and often violent style that made the promotion so beloved. The next year, WWE did it all over again at ECW One Night Stand 2006, which was also held at the Hammerstein Ballroom. For a second year, it was a testament to the enduring legacy of ECW. Many fans dressed in old ECW merchandise were transported back in time to relive the rebellious spirit that defined the company. The event seemed to breathe new life into the world of pro wrestling, reminding fans and wrestlers alike of the importance of pushing boundaries and embracing the extreme. One Night Stand 2006 delivered on its promise of showcasing extreme wrestling at its finest. The event featured an array of memorable matches that paid homage to the promotion's legacy, whilst continuing to introduce a new generation of fans to its unique brand of entertainment. Iconic matchups such as Rey Mysterio vs Sabu, Edge and Mick Foley clashing in a match that really pushed the limits of physicality and storytelling, and of course, one of my all-time favourite pro wrestling matches ever, John Cena vs Rob Van Dam. After winning the Money in the Bank ladder match at WrestleMania 22, Rob Van Dam challenged incumbent WWE champion John Cena for his championship in an Extreme Rules match at the upcoming ECW One Night Stand. And what a night to remember! Originally, any member of the ECW brand who held a world championship, either the WWE Championship or the World Heavyweight belt, would have the title changed into the ECW World Championship as long as it remained on the brand. Each match was characterised by high spots, brutal chair shots, and the unrelenting passion of the wrestlers and fans. ECW One Night Stand 2006 holds a special place in the history of professional wrestling. Beyond being a nostalgic celebration of the past, the event played a significant role in influencing the future of the industry. The resounding success of the show led to the revival of ECW as a fully fledged brand under the WWE umbrella. This resurgence allowed new talent to flourish and provided a platform for innovative and unconventional wrestling styles to thrive. The event also served as a reminder that alternative wrestling promotions could compete and capture the hearts of fans on a global scale. Not only did everyone in the Manhattan Ballroom all really get behind everything that I stood for, because they knew bringing ECW back was my idea, they knew back in the day that I brought ECW up to new heights. Not only were all the fans pro-RVD in the extreme, at the same time they were all against everything that Cena stood for. The demise of ECW made me probably more disappointed than anything else related to wrestling in my career. Just 2 days following Rob Van Dam's victory over John Cena to claim the WWE Championship at the second ECW One Night Stand event, WWE made a significant move by introducing ECW as a separate brand on the Sci-Fi television network. On the premiere episode of WWE ECW, Paul Heyman presented Rob Van Dam with the ECW World Championship as a replacement. However, Rob Van Dam decided that he instead wanted to hold both belts simultaneously. Van Dam would lose both championships in the same week in the following month, the WWE Championship to Edge and the ECW World Championship to The Big Show. The new program showcased beloved ECW icons such as Sabu and the Sandman, alongside prominent WWE superstars like Big Show and Kurt Angle. Its debut proved to be a massive success, quickly soaring to the pinnacle of the network's rating charts. Nonetheless, as time passed over the course of the next 4 years, the original essence of the Extreme brand gradually eroded, diminishing bit by bit until it eventually merged into the vast sea of world wrestling entertainment. ECW's revival on Sci-Fi, which took place from 2006 to 2010, has often been seen as a disappointment and ultimately a failure. Several factors contributed to this perception. The ECW brand had gained a cult following for its rebellious hardcore style of wrestling, featuring intense matches, extreme violence and blood. When ECW was brought on Sci-Fi, it was heavily toned down and sanitized to fit within the constraints of mainstream television. This departure from the original spirit of ECW seemed to alienate many of its passionate fans who were drawn to the promotion for different reasons than what Sci-Fi could provide. The revival failed to capture the authentic essence of the company. The original ECW was known for its gritty and intimate atmosphere, often held in smaller venues with passionate fans. However, the Sci-Fi version of ECW was produced within the confines of a larger WWE production, losing the intimate feel and raw energy that made the original ECW so special. The creative decisions and booking decisions for the ECW brand on Sci-Fi were also often criticised. The roster largely consisted of new talent who were unfamiliar to the ECW fanbase, and there was a lack of compelling storylines and character development. Many of the established ECW stars who returned for the revival were underutilised or poorly booked, which further frustrated fans and diminished their interest in the product. The ECW brand on Sci-Fi faced stiff competition within the WWE itself. The flagship shows Raw and SmackDown were already established and had larger audiences and more recognisable stars. As a result, the ECW brand struggled to stand out and differentiate itself, leading to a lack of viewership and diminished interest from within WWE itself. By the time ECW was revived on Sci-Fi, the landscape of professional wrestling had significantly changed. The edgy and extreme style of wrestling that ECW had popularised in the 1990s and carved out a niche with had become much less mainstream. The appetite for the extreme had waned, and fans were now more interested in different styles of wrestling, focusing on athleticism, in-ring storytelling, and larger-than-life characters. These factors combined to create a product that failed to capture the passion and excitement of the original ECW, ultimately leading to the downfall of the brand on Sci-Fi. WWE ECW December to Dismember was a pay-per-view event that took place on December 3rd, 2006, under the rebranded WWE ECW. The event was held at the James Brown Arena in Augusta, Georgia. It is worth noting that the event received significant criticisms and is widely regarded as one of the worst pay-per-views in WWE history. the Extreme Elimination Chamber match for the ECW World Heavyweight Championship. This was the main event and the match that gave the event its name. The participants were The Big Show, Bobby Lashley, CM Punk, Test, and Hardcore Holly, none of whom had ever even stepped foot in an ECW ring, and Rob Van Dam. The match concept was intriguing, but the execution fell flat. The crowd was seemingly uninterested, and the eliminations felt rushed and anticlimactic. Bobby Lashley emerged as the winner and became the ECW World Champion. Overall, December to Dismember was heavily criticised for its lacklustre matches, poor booking decisions, and an overall lack of excitement. The event failed to live up to expectations and didn't deliver the quality that fans had come to expect from either WWE or ECW pay-per-views. It is considered one of the most disappointing events in the company's history. The event had a weak lineup with matches that lacked star power and compelling storylines. Many of the matches were hastily put together and lacked the build-up necessary to create anticipation amongst fans. Despite being promoted as an ECW event, it failed to capture the spirit and essence of the original company. The event felt more like a watered-down version of WWE's main roster programming, rather than the edgier and hardcore style that ECW was synonymous with. The absence of key ECW superstars such as Sandman and Sabu in prominent roles was a major disappointment for fans who expected to see the iconic ECW roster showcased. Instead, the event relied heavily on wrestlers from WWE's main roster who didn't necessarily fit the ECW mold. The match quality and booking decisions were subpar, the matches lacked excitement and failed to engage the audience. The Extreme Elimination Chamber match, which was meant to be the highlight of the event, suffered from rushed eliminations and a lack of drama. One cathartic moment did come, however, for the performers of ECW in April of 2007. More than 80,000 WWE fans begun chanting ECW as ECW took stage at WrestleMania, with Joey Styles and Taz calling the action on commentary. It's a huge moment for all of the performers who had been with ECW for so many years, who started out in front of a few hundred fans in a bingo hall in Philadelphia and were now front and centre on the biggest stage in the wrestling calendar. The match at WrestleMania 23 was popular with fans and served as a way to give some of the longest-serving members of the company their ever-important WrestleMania moment. During the final episode of ECW on Sci-Fi, a significant turn of events unfolded. In an Extreme Rules match, Ezekiel Jackson, under the guidance of William Regal, emerged victorious over Christian, seizing the ECW World Championship. It was an electrifying moment that marked the end of an era. Unless WWE ever decides to resurrect the belt once again, Ezekiel Jackson, known as the personification of domination, will forever be etched in the record books as the final ever champion. However, behind the curtain, the unpredictable nature of Vince McMahon persisted, and several sources reveal that Paul Heyman, unlike other agents and writers within the company, refused to cower during McMahon's notorious outbursts. On December 3rd, Heyman and McMahon engaged in a heated clash regarding the December to Dismember pay-per-view event and its booking. The tensions reached their zenith the following day in North Charleston in South Carolina, described by an eyewitness as a highly intense meeting. Subsequently, Heyman was asked to leave and reportedly declined WWE's offer to continue working behind the scenes in developmental. At this time, it was never made clear if Heyman's contract expired, he resigned, or he and WWE reached a discreet agreement to part ways. Mr. McMahon aggravated the state of distress by making the decision to send Heyman home, citing declining television ratings and a discontented roster of talent. The WWE chairman justified Heyman's dismissal. In February of 2010, the ECW brand was officially dissolved, and those performers signed to the Extreme branch of WWE were either absorbed into SmackDown and Raw or released. The frustration by Paul Heyman and the men and women that had been brought with him to WWE was palpable backstage. Many felt that Vince McMahon had not delivered on his promise to create a new future for the dying ECW and felt trapped by their contracts, working somewhere they didn't want to be. 5 years later, in November of 2015, the Dudley Boys, engaged in a fierce rivalry with the Wyatt family, orchestrated the return of Tommy Dreamer on Raw, leading to the formation of a fresh iteration of the ECW originals. 2 days later, on December 2nd, 2015, the group made a captivating comeback by introducing the returning Rhino on Raw, who joined forces with them to combat the Wyatts. Subsequently, on December 13th, during the TLC pay-per-view event, the ECW originals faced off against the Wyatt family in an intense 8-man tables elimination match where they suffered defeat. The following night on Raw, they encountered the Wyatts once more in an Extreme Rules match, but again, unfortunately emerged on the losing end. So, once again, the presence of ECW and WWE was mismanaged, mishandled, and fizzled out with little fanfare. As time progressed, the presence of the ECW originals gradually diminished from WWE television, ultimately fading away by 2016. To take a closer look at Vince's opinions on the original ideas of ECW, we need only look at one of the first times he was in control of a storyline featuring an ECW wrestler, when in April of 2000, on an episode of SmackDown, the human suplex machine Taz, who was then ECW World Champion, appeared to take on the WWE Champion Triple H. Now, with Vince McMahon, the man responsible for the outcome of the match, saw WWE and ECW as equals at this time, then surely we'd see a competitive match between the two companies' top stars. But no, of course not. Taz looked tiny compared to Triple H, and even smaller inside of the enormous squared circle of WWE. It was a complete mismatch from the start, showing that Vince McMahon wasn't ever intending to take Taz or any of his colleagues very seriously, sending a message to the WWE fans that they shouldn't either. Taz obviously lost when he was accidentally attacked by Tommy Dreamer, making the pair look as stupid as they did insignificant. So little did Vince value the ECW brand and its world title that in 2007 he made himself the Extreme Championship World Champion, changing his persona to mock the ebonics of urban life in Philadelphia and New York, even wearing a do-rag alongside his belt, and delivering one of the cringiest lines in all of pro wrestling history on live television.
Keep it up, I'm a nigga!
Vince McMahon's relationship with ECW, both the original promotion and the revived brand, is complex and multifaceted. While it's difficult to pinpoint specific personal reasons or feelings, there are a few factors that may have influenced McMahon's perspective on the company. ECW was known for its edgier, more hardcore style of professional wrestling, which included extreme and high-risk matches. This diverged from the more mainstream, family-friendly approach that the WWE traditionally favoured. McMahon may have had reservations about aligning his company's image too closely with the extreme nature of ECW, so why the fuck did he buy it? ECW faced significant financial difficulties during its initial run, ultimately leading to its closure in 2001. McMahon did acquire the assets of the promotion, including its video library, and sought to revive the brand 5 years later. However, the financial instability of ECW may have made McMahon cautious about fully embracing and investing in the brand that had seemingly struggled to make money. So why did he buy it then? As the chairman and owner of WWE, McMahon is known for maintaining a high level of creative control over the company. The ECW brand, even in its revived form, represented a departure from McMahon's established vision for professional wrestling. This might have led to some reluctance in fully embracing ECW and its unique style and presentation. There's many specific stories about Paul Heyman clashing with Stephanie McMahon over their creative visions backstage. So why did he buy it? The rise and fall of Extreme Championship Wrestling represents a compelling chapter in the history of professional wrestling. ECW emerged as a renegade promotion in the early 1990s, pushing the boundaries of the industry and captivating a passionate fanbase with its unique blend of hardcore wrestling, edgy storylines, and unparalleled athleticism. However, despite its initial success, a series of challenges ultimately led to ECW's demise. During its rise, ECW stood out as a beacon of innovation. It introduced a gritty and realistic style of wrestling that resonated with a generation hungry for an alternative to the mainstream offerings of WWE and WCW. ECW showcased a roster of talented performers, many of whom would go on to become household names in the industry. The promotion's unapologetic embrace of violence and adult-orientated content provided a stark contrast to the more sanitized product of its competitors, attracting a dedicated fanbase that craved an edgier form of entertainment. Despite its popularity, however, ECW faced numerous financial and operational challenges that ultimately contributed to its downfall. The promotion struggled with limited financial resources, relying on a patchwork of funding sources to stay afloat. This constant financial strain led to a revolving door of talent and an inability to compete with the deep pockets of larger promotions. In addition, ECW faced legal battles and controversies surrounding its content, which placed further strain on its resources and reputation. Recognizing the popularity of the hardcore and edgy aesthetic, these larger promotions lured away ECW's top stars, leaving the promotion scrambling to rebuild its roster on more than one occasion. This exodus of talent, coupled with mounting financial difficulties, ultimately proved insurmountable, and the original ECW was gone by 2001, even if they did try to keep it going over the next 2 decades. All I can tell you is 25 years later, people are still saying ECW at shows. It gives me goosebumps. It's amazing that all these years later the fans still remember ECW and chant it at shows. It will never die. However, while ECW may have fallen, its impact on the wrestling industry is undeniable. The promotion's influence can be seen in the way that pro wrestling is presented today, with a greater emphasis on violence, athleticism, a more diverse range of characters, and a willingness to push the boundaries of storytelling. ECW's legacy lives on in the hearts of its passionate fan base, as well as in the careers of the wrestlers who honed their craft within these hallowed halls. ECW merch, particularly the iconic ECW logo, continues to be popular amongst wrestling fans today. You can see it on live television during most wrestling programs. Though ECW eventually faced financial difficulties and ceased its proper operations in 2001, its innovative approach to wrestling and its influence on the industry continue to be felt. Many wrestling fans and performers look back at ECW as a revolutionary and unforgettable era in professional wrestling history. In this video, I want to take a look at the lasting impact of the company on this beloved world of grappling and glamour, and how, in turn, the professional wrestling business would serve as a mirror, reflecting the zeitgeist of the end of the last millennium. I want to find out what happened to some of the company's biggest stars, and how their lives were forever changed by one of the most revered and controversial brands in all of sports entertainment. We'll explore some of the modern wrestling brands which were heavily influenced by ECW in their ultra-violent approach to storytelling, and the men and women who laced up their boots and put their bodies through some of the worst pain imaginable in order to entertain us the fans. All of them inspired in some way to start on that long, arduous path to becoming a pro wrestler by the originators of Extreme in the United States, Extreme Championship Wrestling. Extreme Pro Wrestling once stood as a leading hardcore independent in America, overseen by Rob Zakari and managed by Extreme Gifts. Notably, XPW is renowned for its intense deathmatch styles. A significant event in the promotion's history was the annual deathmatch tournament known as Baptized in Blood, or the King of the Death Tournament, which took place from 2000 to 2002. During its initial years from 1999, XPW was primarily based in Los Angeles and operated under the on-camera persona of Rob Zakari, who adopted the ring name of Rob Black. He shared the spotlight with his then-wife Lizzie Borden. XPW's focus was centered around hardcore wrestling, and it developed connections with the adult entertainment industry in LA, given that Rob Black was the owner of the Extreme Associates pornographic film production company. With numerous renowned stars having ventured towards more promising horizons, embracing fresh opportunities within the WWF such as the Dudley Boys and Taz, ECW found itself in a precarious situation. The unfolding events at Heatwave 2000 not only thrust them into the spotlight, but also delivered them a taste of their own medicine. ECW had made a name for themselves partly by invading other wrestling companies and appearing on their televisions, whether it be scripted or not. But now, they were the slightly larger company, and some small upstart was about to try to make a name for themselves. In a fascinating sequence of events, rumours started circulating prior to the show at the Grand Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles. Speculations were rife that wrestlers from Extreme Pro Wrestling were plotting to attend the event, taking advantage of its location in their LA backyard. Being aware of XPW's intentions to invade the pay-per-view, ECW sought the assistance of former porn star Jasmine St. Clair, who was now a part of the ECW roster due to her relationship with the Blue Meanie. St. Clair, having previously worked with XPW, was tasked with identifying any XPW intruders amongst the incoming fans, while ECW owner Paul Heyman had assured that none of his contracted wrestlers would disrupt the event. Since the XPW wrestlers had purchased their tickets like ordinary fans, they couldn't be simply turned away. To minimise the potential disruption, ECW instructed building security to confiscate any signs or have anyone wearing an XPW t-shirt turn it inside out as the attendees entered the arena. The XPW talents, including notable stars such as The Messiah, Supreme, Homeless Jimmy, Kid Chaos, and announcer Chris Kloss, and valet and porn star Christy Mist, no, I haven't heard of any of them either, were escorted to their seats, conveniently located on the side facing the hard cam, ensuring that they were immediately visible on camera. Throughout the event, there was no significant disturbances, aside from a few fans from the rival promotion approaching the XPW wrestlers and valets for autographs and photos. However, after a match between Rhino and the Sandman, Rhino made a bold move by chugging a can of beer, then hurling it towards the XPW invaders, effectively initiating the first confrontation. To the crowd's excitement, Christy Mist garnered a huge pop by removing her top, though to my disappointment when I was a young boy, she remained wearing a bra, ensuring that no nudity was exposed on TV. This unexpected action created tension with Francine, who, because she was also a lovely classy lady, had planned a similar moment during the main event, a Stairway to Hell match between Just Incredible and Tommy Dreamer, where she would also expose her boobs. In a surprising turn of events, prior to the start of the match, the XPW stars boldly flipped their shirts the right way round, proudly displaying the XPW logo. Their rowdy behaviour escalated, catching the attention of Tommy Dreamer, who promptly left the ring on camera and made his way towards the agitated crowd. Almost immediately, a substantial portion of the ECW roster and crew members rushed to support Dreamer. During the commotion, Joey Styles on commentary skillfully attempted to divert attention, claiming that an unruly fan had grabbed Francine. The situation quickly intensified as the XPW wrestlers were forcibly escorted out of the building, with Paul Heyman himself spitting on some members of the XPW crew. What a knacker. Following their removal, Messiah and his associates allegedly began distributing flyers for an upcoming XPW show featuring former ECW stars Sabu and Terry Funk in the main event. This further escalated the conflict, leading to an all-out clash between the ECW and XPW factions. ECW stars including Mikey Whipwreck, Amish Roadkill, Sal E. Graziano, New Jack, and even Paul Heyman actively participated in the fight. Meanwhile, the main event continued inside the arena. Rob Black, associated with XPW, took to the syndicated XPW television show the next week to proclaim his innocence in the matter. In a final rant, he boldly declared that XPW would outlive ECW, and as we're about to find out, his statement would prove true.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to make some comments about the incident that took place at the ECW pay-per-view July 16th.
The wrestling scene in the Northeast experienced a void after the demise of ECW, leading to what came to be known as the Indie Wars. In this period, various promotions competed for the devoted fan base. Key among them was CZW, XPW and 3PW, all of which frequently held events at Viking Hall or the ECW Arena. In late 2002, XPW secured the lease to the arena after Rob Black offered around $60,000 to its owner. On December 12, 2002, Philadelphia witnessed a triple header of wrestling events, with Ring of Honor holding shows in conjunction with CZW and 3PW. This occurrence marked the final events of the latter two promotions at the arena. During CZW's event, its representative Zandig publicly revealed that he had offered $32,000 to retain their place in the arena. However, considering the additional $10,000 monthly expense XPW had to shoulder for that building, it was clear that the lease would not endure for long. GCW, Game Changer Wrestling, formerly recognized as Jersey Championship Wrestling, stands as a prominent American independent professional wrestling promotion rooted in the heart of New Jersey. Initiated by Ricky Otazu in 1999,
What's up, folks? How are you? I'm Ricky O, and this is my partner, CJ.
It underwent a transformation and adopted its current name in 2015, following its acquisition by Danny DeManto and the present owner, Brett Lauderdale. While the essence of the promotion lies in hardcore wrestling akin to ECW, it extends far beyond those boundaries, presenting a plethora of captivating offerings. Over the years, GCW's influence has expanded remarkably, transcending its local origins in New Jersey to encompass the entire United States, with its gripping events captivating audiences nationwide. Furthermore, GCW's global presence extends across borders, with the promotion venturing into international territories such as Japan and Mexico, leaving an indelible mark on the worldwide wrestling scene. Since its relaunch as GCW, the company has attempted to give wrestling fans a varied mix of performers who can entertain crowds with mixed martial arts style bouts, intense mat-based wrestling matches, high-flying lucha libre, all mixed in with sporadic slices of glass-shattering ultra-violence, blood and gore. Having such a varied array of wrestling talent on display was something that the original ECW pioneered at a time when most mainstream wrestling was focused on the powerhouses and the bodybuilders almost exclusively at the top of the card. However, on brief occasions, GCW shows that it is not simply a jack of all trades by incorporating wrestling cards which focus solely on one type of wrestling just for an evening. Annual GCW events such as Effie's Big Gay Brunch pays homage to the LGBTQ members of the wrestling community and is about as inclusive as it gets. Backyard Wrestling does exactly what the event's name suggests. In GCW, Josh Barnett hosts Bloodsport, focused on realism and brutality in its matches, and takes the idea of strong style and mixed martial arts to a whole different level within the wrestling ring. And of course, for the really sick and twisted out there, you have the Nick Gage Invitational. From 2004, GCW hosted the J Cup, a regional tournament featuring many wrestling brands from the local area, and it is named after Chris Candido following his death in 2005. As the company has exploded in popularity over the past few years, GCW's first pay-per-view took place in the Hammerstein Ballroom, a direct nod to ECW, who had made the venue their spiritual home at the end of their initial run. If the similarities between the two wasn't already enough apparent, to date GCW has even hosted former ECW legends Sabu, Rhino, the Sandman, Too Cold Scorpio and Mick Foley. The one huge and obvious improvement that GCW has made with the benefit of hindsight over the company that so closely inspired it is their treatment and portrayal of female wrestlers. Women in GCW hit just as hard as the men and are equally prone to smashing a light tube or two during a match, in stark contrast to the almost grotesque way in which most women were utilised in Paul Heyman's company. If Game Changer Wrestling had several elements that it had adapted from the original ECW, then this next extreme brand only ever adopted one: violence. Combat Zone Wrestling decided that it didn't need the gifted technical wrestlers and complex and interwoven storylines of the company that inspired it. CZW did not need the production values, the flashy arenas or the television networks. It took the idea of bringing a Singapore cane into a pro wrestling match that Extreme Championship had revolutionised in the 90s, but this time the Singapore cane was a samurai sword, and for some reason it had a load of barbed wire strapped around it and a hand grenade sellotaped to the pointy end. Their shows offered a unique brand of wrestling referred to as ultraviolence, featuring an array of hardcore elements. Ladders, tables, steel folding chairs, thumbtacks, barbed wire, weed whackers, light tubes, panes of glass, exploding barbed wire baseball bats, and even fire became common fixtures in the intense spectacle of ultra-violent wrestling presented by CZW. This daring style resonated with a devoted fanbase that had been seeking an outlet for hardcore wrestling, a void left behind by the closure of ECW. In 2001, CZW solidified its position as the premier American hardcore wrestling promotion by hosting the influential Cage of Death 3 show at the ECW Arena, which, coincidentally, took place in the same year that ECW folded. A significant milestone for CZW arrived on May 10, 2003, when the company returned to the revered ECW Arena. They commemorated this achievement with a special show titled Then and Now, A Decade of Defiance. The event served as a heartfelt tribute to a decade of wrestling history within those hallowed halls. Just like ECW, their homegrown roster helped establish what became a top independent promotion in later years. Although they are most commonly known for their ultra-violent style, their shows feature almost every other style of wrestling as well. Just about any card will feature high-flying, comedy, strong style and technical wrestling. The annual Tournament of Death show emphasises the ultra-violent style of CZW, while their annual Best of the Best emphasises on the technical and aerial styles too. Juggalo Championship Wrestling, previously known as Juggalo Championship Wrestling, is an independent professional company from the United States. It was established in 1999 by Violent J and Shaggy 2 Dope, renowned as the hip-hop duo Insane Clown Posse. Presently, JCW holds wrestling events across the US. Notably, the video games Backyard Wrestling Don't Try This at Home and Backyard Wrestling 2 There Goes the Neighborhood feature various independent wrestlers from this promotion.
And we didn't come here to mess around. This ain't no ninny nanny. This ain't no peppermint patty playground. This is Backyard Wrestling 2. That means twice the intensity, twice the passion. Do you have what it takes?
In the era of Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, Jerry Springer, and Jackass, spearheading the rise of counterculture for young teens around the world in the late 90s, we saw the pro wrestling industry respond with the Attitude Era. 157 middle fingers flipped, 434 obscene phrases, and 1,658 crotch gestures. This is the type of lewd and exhilarating content you could expect to find during the Attitude Era in WWF in 1998. This much talked about time in pro wrestling was a revolutionary age of drastic change and monumental success. Years of squeaky clean production values within the pro wrestling giant WWF meant its fans were starting to switch allegiances towards World Championship Wrestling and their much grittier way of presenting their fights. In response, Vince McMahon, the owner of the WWF, now WWE, made the decision to steer his pro wrestling behemoth towards the outrageous and extreme. More nudity, more violence, more adult themes. As with so much in the late 90s, WWE took their shows to the limits of excess. All of it in front of more fans than ever before thought possible. At its peak, over 8 million people would watch their live weekly shows to see just how far WWF would be willing to push the boundaries in order to close the gap between their rivals WCW. Combined with the fact that wrestlers such as Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Mankind, The Undertaker, and Triple H were all coming into the peaks of their career and creating moments that would go down as some of the most iconic and memorable in sports entertainment history. For those pro wrestling fans whose appetite for the extreme was still not satisfied, a hardcore offshoot began to emerge, full of extreme violence, stupidity, and humour, known as backyard wrestling. An extremely low budget and even more lowbrow form of wrestling, with little in the way of rules, presentation, or indeed limits, exploded in popularity and began to gather momentum amongst youngsters in the US. Taking pro wrestling and turning the dial to 11, backyard wrestling featured more violence, more weaponry, and more nudity than even the most hardcore of its contemporaries, oftentimes seeing untrained performers battling it out in unregulated and ungoverned spectacles which rode the line between a wrestling match and a car crash. With the popularity of backyard wrestling at an all-time high as we entered the new millennium, in 2003, Paradox Development and Eidos Interactive created Backyard Wrestling Don't Try This at Home for the Xbox and PlayStation 2, which released to mixed reviews. The game revolves around a talk show homage to Jerry Springer called Today's Topic.
Welcome to the show. Today's topic is backyard wrestling, the scourge of our nation's youth. Now, I'm not talking about whacking your buddy with a pine cone or knocking your sister into the hedges. That's good, clean fun. These backyard wrestlers are beating each other brain dead with light bulbs and barbed wire? Why? We'll explore this violent phenomenon by talking to people whose lives have been affected by backyard wrestling. Let's meet our first guest, Wendell. Welcome to the show, Wendell. So tell us more about...
Wow, I can't believe I'm here. I want to say hi to everyone at home. Hi.
Wendell, what do you like to do on the weekends?
Well, I work hard all week at the pickle factory. And when the weekend comes, I like to fire up the grill and do some kick-ass barbecue. Ribs, chicken, burgers, dogs.
Oh yeah, nothing wrong with that. So what's the problem?
Backyard wrestling, that's the problem. My brother's friends knocked me to the damn barbecue, and I'm not even trying to wrestle. I work for a living. I just ruined it. And I've got grill marks on my face.
Oh my God. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We'll be right back.
Which sees various members of the backyard wrestling scene interviewed before being entered into several ludicrous arenas of combat. You can take your chosen wrestler into war, surrounded by cars in a parking lot and truck stop, surrounded by hanging meat in a slaughterhouse, or women who are treated like meat inside of a strip club.
Is it hot in here, or is it just me?
The rude boy invented backyard wrestling.
The roster consists of a mix of real-life backyard wrestlers, some made up for the game's release, and even some names from bigger promotions such as hardcore deathmatch icons Sabu. A year later, Eidos and Paradox created a sequel where they tightened up the controls, improved the graphics, and added more interactivity to foreign objects and backgrounds during matches.
That it takes all these successful elements of wrestling video games, which is these really great wrestling maneuvers, over-the-top weapons use, great grappling and submission systems, and kind of hand-to-hand combat.
Backyard Wrestling 2, There Goes the Neighborhood, had an expanded roster which features more of the Insane Clown Posse, New Jack, Vampiro, and the Sandman, as well as some porn stars and even some indie wrestlers such as Sonjay Dutt, Ruckus, and Vic Grimes.
12 years of funk, baby. Yeah. That's 12 years of putting it down.
The graphics are fairly smooth, and the action, although fairly repetitive, does offer a great alternative to the less violent and ridiculous simulation-type games that are released in the modern era. There is so much packed into these two titles that going back and playing them all these years later was satisfying and very reminiscent of a bygone era, even if only for a brief couple of hours. Playing through these two games was a real hit of late 90s and early 2000s nostalgia, which relied on all the tropes present in mainstream media at the time. Dick jokes, violence, nudity, and a post-punk attitude seep through every orifice. Now, it's by no means a great game, but for a blast from the past filled with over-the-top action, boobs and blood, you can't go far wrong with this often forgotten slice of wrestling video game history. In its early years, the talent pool mainly comprised of rappers and well-known figures performing under parody alternate names. However, after a name change, the company underwent a roster transformation, shifting its focus to independent and hardcore wrestlers alongside retaining several established names. JCW's foundation rested predominantly on hardcore, but over time it has embraced elements from the Puro Resu and high-flying lucha libre wrestling styles from Japan and Mexico respectively. Their roster showcases a diverse mix of independent and seasoned performers. Wrestler and creative writer for the company, Corporal Robinson, describes the product as a refreshing departure from the original wrestling shows. It features wild and eccentric characters, hard-hitting hardcore matches, live music, and high-flying acrobatics, offering a blend of different flavours for those seeking it. JCW has drawn comparisons to ECW in various ways. Both companies have passionate and energetic fan bases, as noted by Alex Marvez of Scripps Howard News Service. Additionally, Bruce Wirt, host of One Wrestling Radio, views Juggalo Championship Wrestling as a modern and improved version of ECW, attributing this comparison to their fan following, wrestling styles, and original storytelling. Even the co-founders Joseph Bruce and Joseph Utzler acknowledged that Extreme Championship Wrestling served as a major influence on their company's style, including their use of unique camera angles. Realising the growing popularity of ECW and its unique brand of extreme, Vince McMahon, the owner of then WWF, wanted to capitalise. The WWF Hardcore Championship was introduced on November 2nd, 1998, during an episode of Monday Night Raw. The championship was designed to be defended under 24/7 rules, which meant that the title holder had to defend the championship anywhere, anytime, as long as a referee was present. This rule led to some wild and unpredictable moments in WWE. Wrestlers and non-wrestling personnel could win the title if they pinned the current champion, and the title could change hands multiple times in a single day, leading to the belt lacking in any real prestige, but surpassing expectations when it came to adding that unpredictability factor that the late 90s on television was so known for. This unique stipulation led to entertaining and somewhat comedic segments where wrestlers would constantly ambush each other to try and win the belt. The Hardcore Championship provided an opportunity for mid-card and lower-card wrestlers to gain exposure and showcase their skills, and a way for WWE to try and capture the hearts and, most importantly, wallets of ECW's ever-growing fanbase, and their desire for more gritty and violent wrestling matches. Fittingly tying the belt back to ECW, in April of 2002, the Hardcore Championship was unified with the Intercontinental Championship by then-champion and ex-ECW legend Rob Van Dam, and the Hardcore title from that point was officially retired. One part of the Extreme concept that outlived the existence of the Hardcore belt was the prominence of more matches within WWE that feature the use of weapons and props. Perhaps the use of graphic violence and gore has been sidelined in modern WWE, but over the past 20 years or so, we've seen the company allow its wrestlers to push the boundaries of what is acceptable within the confines of mainstream primetime television. With the introduction of WWE's PG era, we've seen them step further away from barbed wire, thumbtacks and glass, but those punctuating moments of extreme can still serve to elevate a bitter rivalry within the company. Wrestlers from Raw, SmackDown and NXT have all chosen such moments as main events of pay-per-views and exclamation points at the end of a feud to throw themselves from atop a cage or a ladder, swinging chairs and ropes, bats and canes as they come crashing down onto their opponents. For me, I'm glad that WWE has been selective in its use of this inspiration from ECW. The company's use of the hardcore and extreme has fluctuated over the years, in line with audiences' sensibilities and desires, not always at the focal point of everyone's attention, but still as a tool to be brought out at the right moment on a big stage to leave a lasting impact. So, at this point, it had been almost a decade since the original ECW had closed its doors for the first time, and almost 20 years since the company was founded. WWE had tried to make money leeching off of the organic success of Paul Heyman's company, but the false and forced feeling of Vince McMahon's attempt at extreme had all but guaranteed its failure. So, as TNA seemingly built its identity around copying failed ideas from their bigger competitor at this time, of course, the company wanted to try their hand at failing to revive ECW. In July of 2010, the group made their first appearance in TNA as EV 2.0, EV standing for Extreme Violence or Extreme Version, depending on who you ask. However, the reunion of the ECW originals was indirectly acknowledged and not officially promoted with that name, as WWE held the rights to all trademarks and assets. On the TNA Impact program, Tommy Dreamer brought together Rob Van Dam, Mick Foley, Raven, Rhino, Brother Devon, Stevie Richards, Al Snow to bring chaos to the order within the company and quickly set to work attacking the rest of the roster. This led to the owner and booker of TNA, Dixie Carter, coming to the ring and pleading with Dreamer to stop EV's destruction of the set and roster. She agreed to allow Dreamer and the rest of the ECW originals a reunion they could be proud of. She announced a rebrand of the Hard Justice pay-per-view to a new show, Hardcore Justice, which would take place in August, with the main event of Rob Van Dam facing old rival Sabu. To oppose the invading ECW performers, stars from TNA stepped up and quickly formed an alliance known as Fortune. Abyss and AJ Styles, Kazarian, Robert Roode, James Storm, Douglas Williams and Matt Morgan were led by Ric Flair at this time. However, things started to fall apart. After Team 3D's contract with TNA expired, they ceased to appear as members of the brand. and the same was true for Bill Alfonso and the Sandman, who failed to show up for an Impact taping on August the 23rd. Guido Mariato and Tony Luke made their final appearances for TNA on the August the 26th edition of Impact. At the No Surrender event, EV 2.0 suffered defeats in all 3 of their matches. Sabu's attempts to dethrone Douglas Williams as the TNA X Division champion ended in failure. Rhino lost a Falls Count Anywhere match against Abyss, and Dreamer was defeated by AJ Styles. The following week, Dreamer returned with Raven, Stevie Richards, Sabu and Rhino. They announced that Dixie Carter had granted them a lethal lockdown match against Fortune at Bound for Glory. On the live edition of Impact on October 7th, Mick Foley emerged victorious in a last man standing match against Ric Flair. At Bound for Glory, Dreamer, Raven, Rhino, Richards and Sabu triumphed over Fortune members Style, Kazarian, Morgan, Rude and Storm in a lethal lockdown match. During Turning Point, Brian Kendrick, Raven, Richards, Rhino and Sabu faced Fortune in a 10-man tag team match, where each member of EV 2.0 put their TNA contracts on the line. Fortune emerged as the winners, and Sabu was subsequently fired by Flair. And because this is TNA, and due to the particular nature of their management, Sabu's release from the promotion was real, and he was actually fired. In the following week, Raven was compelled to put his TNA future at stake in a match against TNA World Heavyweight Champion Jeff Hardy. Raven was also defeated by Hardy, resulting in his release from TNA, which was also a legitimate decision. Stevie Richards announced his departure from TNA on January 11, 2011. The company continued to work to scout talent from around the wrestling world, something which would see them not only creating a good working relationship with Mexican and US-based promotions, but also build to solidify the bridges between WCW and WWF. Heyman regularly allowed some of his hottest talent to be poached by the bigger companies in order to keep them sweet, something which would turn out to be a fine tactical decision on his part. During that period, Kevin Sullivan and Arn Anderson had a professional relationship with various promotions, both appearing in ECW. WCW also acquired Woman and Conan from ECW, with Woman serving as Sandman's valet. Conan, known for his involvement in the Extreme Lucha Libre movement, participated in a televised tag match alongside Rey Mysterio, Juventud Guerrero and Psychosis. Surprisingly, Conan seamlessly fit into the group despite internal reservations. The Steiner brothers played a crucial role in shaping Taz's career, as Taz emerged as a barefoot, savage fighter. After spending time training with the Steiners, Taz became a dominant force in MMA and suplex-style wrestling for a consecutive 5-year period. At an outdoor show for Hardcore TV, the Steiner brothers defeated Big Dick Dudley and Vampire Warrior, and also winning a 6-man tag match as well. Ron Simmons found himself in ECW after being unjustly fired or laid off by WCW. He had a lackluster match with ECW World Champion Shane Douglas in Florida, with the blame likely falling on Shane. Terry Gordy suffered a stroke prior to joining ECW, and his in-ring performances were disheartening to witness. Despite reforming the Miracle Violence connection with Dr. Death, Gordy's health issues prevented him from having dream matches. He also faced Brian Lee and fought Raven for the ECW title. Sadly, Gordy was a mere shadow of his former self and struggled to cut promos due to the adverse effects of his brain and motor functions. WCW also managed to sign Crash the Terminator, but his tenure mostly involved matches against the Eliminators without significant contributions elsewhere. ECW originally introduced the Dudley family, a large faction with numerous members. However, over time, Bubba Ray and Devon emerged as the dominant figures, and they became known as the Dudley Boys, representing the face of the faction and becoming the most successful tag team in ECW's history. Their reign included holding the tag team titles an impressive 8 times in the promotion. Beyond ECW, the Dudley Boys achieved tremendous success in various other wrestling companies. They captured the WWE Tag Team titles an astounding 10 times, the TNA titles on 3 occasions, and the IWGP titles twice. Their accomplishments and impact on the wrestling world earned them a rightful place in the WWE Hall of Fame as a tag team. Presently, Devon has taken on a role as producer for WWE, contributing his knowledge and expertise behind the scenes. On the other hand, Bubba Ray is actively working with Ring of Honor, showcasing his talents and experience in another reputable wrestling organisation. Sabu was the quintessential ECW wrestler, a wild and impassioned superstar who subjected both himself and his adversaries to extreme levels of punishment. Renowned as a hardcore legend, he earned his fame through intense rivalries with notable names such as Taz and Rob Van Dam, and a fruitful alliance with Van Dam during their time in Extreme Championship Wrestling. Within the tumultuous realm of that company, Sabu reached the pinnacle of success, becoming a 2-time world champion, a TV champion on one occasion, and claiming the tag team titles 3 times. Although he embarked on a brief journey in TNA and WWE, his career was somewhat hampered by health challenges for a few years after he left ECW. Yet, as a testament to his unwavering passion for pro wrestling, Sabu has recently made a comeback in Impact, demonstrating his resilience and determination to continue his legacy of entertaining fans. Shane Douglas, the catalyst behind some of ECW's rise to prominence, made an indelible mark as its face. Formerly known as the Dynamic Dude in WCW, he embarked on a transformative journey to ECW, where he achieved an extraordinary feat by capturing the prestigious NWA World title. However, rather than basking in the glory of this achievement, Douglas defiantly discarded the NWA belt, boldly declaring himself as the new face of ECW. During his tenure with the company, Shane Douglas cemented his legacy, becoming a 4-time world champion and earning the distinction of being a 2-time TV champ as well. Despite brief departures to WWE and WCW, Douglas found himself drawn back to ECW on 2 separate occasions. Following his stint in ECW, Shane Douglas ventured into TNA for a brief period, before subsequently embracing the vibrant world of indie wrestling. Most recently, he showcased his talents as part of the Detroit-based XICW, perpetuating his passion for the sport and continuing to leave an enduring impact on the wrestling scene. Sandman, while not renowned for his technical wrestling prowess, possessed a unique charisma that propelled him to success within the world of ECW. His style primarily centered around brawling and smashing beer cans on his head, yet he proved to be a dominant force within the company, securing an impressive 5 ECW World Championships and holding the tag team titles as well. Despite opportunities in various other promotions like TNA, Sandman never quite replicated the fan favourite experience that he had in Extreme Championship Wrestling. However, his enduring popularity persisted as he remained a beloved figure in the hearts of wrestling enthusiasts. In 2018, Sandman resurfaced in Ring of Honor, delighting fans with his appearances, and the following year in 2019, he also made notable appearances in MLW, showcasing that his allure and impact in the wrestling world transcended time. Raven, a renowned figure in the wrestling world, boasts an illustrious career with remarkable achievements. Within the fervent realm of ECW, he reached the pinnacle as a 2-time ECW World Champion and further solidified his legacy by securing the tag team titles an impressive 4 times. While his stint in WWE brought him a huge number of hardcore title reigns, it is undeniable that his true success and impact were most prominent during his time in ECW. Additionally, Raven found championship success in WCW, displaying his versatility as a wrestler. In more recent years, Raven has gracefully transitioned into the indie wrestling scene, making compelling appearances in various promotions. Beyond the ring, he has also ventured into the realm of podcasting, sharing his insights and stories with fans. Following his departure from ECW, Tommy Dreamer embarked on a multifaceted journey into the wrestling world. He played a pivotal role in the brief resurgence of the company during its WWE revival, showcasing his dedication to preserving its legacy. Subsequently, Dreamer transitioned into a behind-the-scenes role as a producer for WWE, contributing his expertise to the development of new talent and the overall wrestling product. Despite these ventures, Dreamer continues to make captivating appearances in various independent promotions and remains as an integral part of Impact Wrestling, thrilling fans with his tenacity and passion for the sport. Most notably, he has devoted much of his time to the establishment and management of his very own promotion, aptly named the House of Hardcore. Through this venture, Dreamer has crafted a platform for wrestlers to showcase their talents and has created a unique space for fans to relish the essence of hardcore wrestling. During the era of ECW, Rob Van Dam proved to be a trailblazer in the wrestling world, captivating audiences with his revolutionary style. A masterful fusion of martial arts, high-flying maneuvers, and his ingenious use of chairs in matches elevated him to stardom, making him one of the most exhilarating figures in the company and an adored fan favourite, even when portraying the role of a heel. While RVD held prestigious titles such as 2-time Tag Team Champion and TV Champion in ECW, his extraordinary skills and electrifying performances surpassed the need for championships to establish him as a top-tier talent. Transitioning to WWE, he continued to soar, reaching the pinnacle of success by capturing their world title, achieving this greatness by defeating John Cena. This triumph solidified him as one of the most accomplished ECW originals following the company's dissolution. In recent times, RVD has made a triumphant return to Impact Wrestling, where he once again rose to prominence as a former world champion, reminding fans of his enduring talent and unwavering passion for pro wrestling. Lance Storm's in-ring prowess solidified his position as a top-tier technical wrestler during his time in ECW. Eventually, he embarked on a new journey in WCW and later appeared as one of the first people during the invasion of the WWE. Following his extended tenure in WWE and the rest of his pro wrestling career, Storm seamlessly transitioned into the role of a top-notch trainer, sharing his wealth of knowledge and experience with aspiring wrestlers. This dedication to cultivating talent led him back to WWE, where he served as a valued producer, contributing to the overall product. Unfortunately, amid unforeseen circumstances, Storm faced a furlough from WWE, leaving him in a state of anticipation regarding his future within the industry. Nonetheless, his invaluable contributions and undeniable skills have undoubtedly left a lasting impact on the wrestling fans around the world. Joey Styles, a prominent figure in the world of ECW, held the esteemed position of the top commentator and mostly only commentator throughout the entire promotion's history. Paul Heyman's unwavering trust in Styles was evident, as he almost entirely called matches solo, showcasing his exceptional skills on the microphone. However, following his departure from WWE, Joey Styles took a step back from the wrestling industry. He made controversial appearances in Evolve, which ultimately led to his exit from the wrestling scene. Subsequently, he pursued a new career path outside of the ring, taking on an office job that allowed him to explore fresh opportunities away from the world of professional wrestling. In the early days, Taz found himself in a tag team wrestling group as part of the Tasmaniacs before he rose to prominence in ECW. Initially known as the Tasmaniac himself, his journey took a dramatic turn when a neck injury sidelined him for about 4 months. Upon his return to ECW, Taz embraced a new persona as simply Taz, adopting a heel character and leaving a trail of destruction in his wake, tearing through the rest of the roster. Taz's list of accolades continued to grow when he captured the ECW World title in 2 separate reigns, in addition to securing 2 TV title reigns and 3 tag team title reigns. Subsequently, Taz embarked on a stint in WWE as a wrestler and commentator. It was relatively short-lived, as he eventually retired from in-ring competition through injury. In the later stages of his career, he found a home in TNA. He is also a key part of the commentary team in All Elite Wrestling, with his son Hook being a performer there, who has managed to maintain his appearance and continue his wrestling career. After his time in WWE, where he formed a formidable tag team with Heath Slater for a couple of years, Rhino found his way to Impact Wrestling upon the expiration of his contract. You may remember Rhino for his appearances in WWF in the late 90s and early 2000s, his interactions with the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian and the Dudleys. His short, stout stature made his explosive power and agile strength all the more impressive. Rhino would go on to wrestle for TNA, as well as a return to WWE in the modern day and appearances in NXT. However, what you may not know is that the man behind the gore once ran for the Michigan House of Representatives in his home state, explaining that his years between the ropes would set him up for success in the political arena. Wrestling has also taught me to feel emotions. If I can't feel the audience's emotion, I can't give them what they want. It's the same with voters. You have to feel the voters' emotions. There would be 2 rounds of voting to decide a victor. In August 2016, Guerin was victorious in the first round of voting and would go on to the general election against a Democratic challenger who was the heavy favourite. He said, "I'm very happy and honoured. I'm happy I won the nomination, and going into the general election, I know it's a different ballgame right now." During this time, Guerin worked hard to explain his prospective policies and win the hearts of voters in Michigan. He explained, "I won't force my faith on anyone. We have to respect each other. I love freedom of religion. Unions don't bother me at all. My brother's been a union worker his whole life, and they've treated him well. It's important that we have programs to help people who need it. We just have to be careful about how we run them. It's important to show younger men and women that nothing's free. If you want to eat, you've got to work. If the younger generation sees me stepping up and being an example, they'll see that anything they want is possible too. I'll never stop fighting for them. Instead of turning away from his past in pro wrestling, as so many have done when they step into the political spotlight, Rhino stuck true to his history, even going so far as to having Rhino placards for his supporters alongside those displaying his real name. Wrestling's my job. You know, sports entertainment is a passion of mine. It's a great vehicle where I can motivate and inspire people. Kids look up to me, adults look up to you, and I wouldn't want to walk away from that now. He even enlisted the help of his then TNA colleagues in Shane Douglas and Kurt Angle to help with advertising his campaign.
Hi, this is Troy Martin, but you probably remember me better as the franchise Shane Douglas from Extreme Championship Wrestling. Remember ECW? ECW. There's a guy named Terrence Guido Guerin who's running for the 15th District in Michigan. Good friend of mine, I know him as Rhino. I can tell you one thing, in over the 20 years that I've known Terry Guerin, is that he's always been a classy guy in the dressing room, a guy that's been willing to stand up for the principles of the wrestlers, making sure the wrestlers' rights were always taken care of, which is a big issue in professional wrestling. In other words, Terry's a leader. Terry's the kind of guy that Michigan needs in the state assembly, the state legislature, to make sure that you people have your rights protected from the career politicians. Go to the ballot box on election day. Make sure you press for District 15 to vote for Terrence Guido Guerin. Watch your back. He's a great guy. A leader. He's going to be a great state representative for the state of Michigan.
But even the threat of Kurt Angle putting Michigan voters into ankle locks if they didn't pick Rhino didn't prove enough to turn the tide in his favour. The numbers are in, and I regret to say I was unsuccessful in my bid, but I was very successful in becoming closer to my community, knocking on doors, talking with residents, and just forming a bond. I knew going into this that Dearborn is a Democratic district, and it would be an uphill battle, and a battle I was willing to take on. Myself and my volunteers created something out of nothing, a campaign we pushed forward with honour and pride. I'm very proud to have had them in my corner. Rhino was ultimately defeated in his quest for political glory, but has since continued to work for good causes and charities in his home state of Michigan. With the insertion of extreme violence and lashings of foul language, ECW also introduced sexually objectifying women to their repertoire around this time. When ECW was first starting, it was more geared towards children. ECW was mainly that 18 to 24 male demographic of testosterone-filled, ass-kicking wrestling with hot women. There was also a lot of blood, a no-no in WCW and WWE at the time, and many women were getting their butt kicked by the men. Some wrestling fans on the internet were offended, and some people weren't, but there were a lot of people talking. From airheaded cheerleaders to ex-porn stars, Paul Heyman brought in a legion of women who were there for nothing more than to shake their butts and look good on the arms of their male competitors, and for the time period it worked perfectly. Tammy Sytch's prior success in WWE as Sunny made her a big name, with more star power than most in ECW. Sytch had taken a big hit through the years, with various arrests relating to her driving under the influence multiple times. This meant her fall from grace was swift and sad. On her way down, she made several appearances alongside Chris Candido. The popularity of Beulah McGillicuddy in ECW came when she was in a love triangle with Raven and Tommy Dreamer. Beulah's backstory was that Dreamer broke her heart at summer camp, and she ended up with Raven as the two looked to get revenge for his past actions. An eventual face turn would see Dreamer and Beulah becoming a couple with tremendous results. The retirement of Beulah came towards the very end of ECW when she moved on to a different field of expertise. Beulah became a successful children's book author and now has an actual family with Dreamer after they became a real couple outside of the ring. Francine is the top pick for me as the most important woman in ECW's history when looking back at her long run. The role managing Shane Douglas put him over the top as the missing piece for his heel character. Tommy Dreamer and Just Incredible also benefited from having her at their side. WWE did sign Francine in 2006 for the ECW brand relaunch, but the company did little with her of note before they released her. We did a lot of stuff, and we always incorporated sex into everything, because sex sells. After ECW, Francine faced challenges in securing another consistent gig with WWE or TNA. However, she gracefully transitioned to a post-wrestling life, making her presence felt through social media, convention appearances and interviews discussing her illustrious career. While her return to the spotlight was centered around nostalgic moments and engaging with fans at conventions, Francine's main focus shifted away from the wrestling world. Despite the shift in her personal journey, she remains cherished and remembered for her significant contributions to the world of wrestling during her time in ECW. The last few years of ECW featured Dawn Marie becoming a breakout star. Dawn managing the Impact Players tag team helped her break out as a charismatic talent with a look that clearly connected with the ECW fans. WWE did sign Marie after ECW went out of business, and she had a rather successful stint there as a heel. Although the company was clearly run by seedy men who saw these female performers as nothing more than some cleavage and a little titillation for the young men in the crowd, some of the women on the roster managed to make a name for themselves as in-ring competitors despite this fact. The ECW run of Jazz added something different than the other women in the company since she wrestled against the men. Jazz did spend some time managing the Impact Players, but it was the matches versus male competitors that got her to show her in-ring skills. One of the rare instances of Paul Heyman missing the boat on a future talent saw Lita playing the character of Miss Congeniality. Lita's chances of success were slim to none in a terrible role as the girlfriend of Danny Doring. The main purpose of Lita's character was to get heat in the form of negative chants that would hopefully carry over to Doring and his partner Roadkill. Lita became a legendary star for WWE once she left the company and is considered one of the most popular and influential female wrestlers of her generation, despite the fact of her regularly delivering one of the worst moonsaults in the industry's history. So now ECW had the violence, it had the excellent in-ring work and recognisable wrestling faces, thrown in with some late 90s TNA, and you have a magnet for rabid, young, disenfranchised teenagers pulling them from the local area to each and every one of ECW shows.
I think we need to hook you up to the juice.
The classic video game ECW Hardcore Revolution, released in 2000, and sought to capture the unique essence of Extreme Championship Wrestling in 3D pixels. Developed by Acclaim Entertainment, the game aimed to deliver an authentic experience for fans of the promotion, and in some ways delivered. Hardcore Revolution succeeds in capturing the essence of ECW's gritty and extreme atmosphere, even if it does look massively dated by today's standards. The game showcases an impressive roster of ECW wrestlers, complete with their signature moves, entrance themes and costumes. The attention to detail in replicating the unique personalities of these wrestlers adds an authentic touch that fans of the promotion could appreciate. The gameplay mechanics in ECW Hardcore Revolution provide a solid foundation for the in-ring action. The controls are somewhat intuitive, allowing players to execute various moves and combinations with relative ease. The game includes a wide array of match types, including hardcore matches, ladder matches and table matches, which align with the extreme nature of ECW. The inclusion of weapons and interactive elements within the arena adds an extra layer of excitement and strategy, and it's also sometimes fun just to whack your mates around the head with a big stick. One of the standout features for me of ECW Hardcore Revolution is its robust creator wrestler mode, something that I've been a fan of since I was a kid. This mode allows players to design and customize their own wrestlers, from appearance and movesets to entrance music and attire. The level of depth and customization options available in this mode enhances the game's replay value, and it is absolutely my favourite part of the game. And I think it's a great avenue for personal creativity. ECW Hardcore Revolution shines in its multiplayer and versus modes. The game allows players to compete against friends with the inclusion of tag team matches, battle royals and tournament modes, which adds variety to the multiplayer experience, making it enjoyable for small group gatherings or a little bit of friendly competition. While Hardcore Revolution was released during the early days of 3D gaming, the graphics and visual presentation have not aged well. The character models lack detail and can appear blocky and stiff. The arenas and environments, although recognisable, lack visual polish and fail to capture the grandeur of a live ECW event. ECW Hardcore Revolution suffers from a limited moveset for each wrestler, which can result in repetitive gameplay over time. Additionally, the AI of the computer-controlled opponents can be inconsistent, often failing to provide a consistently challenging experience. This can lead to matches feeling predictable and lacking in a little bit of strategic depth. The game's story mode, which at first seemed like it had a lot of promise, was attempting to emulate the narrative-driven style of ECW, but falls short in terms of depth and engagement. The storylines and character progression are minimal, leaving players craving a more immersive and captivating experience. This missed opportunity to fully explore the rich storytelling potential of ECW is a notable drawback for me, but perhaps like all the negatives of this game, was just a limit of the system at the time. ECW Hardcore Revolution successfully captures the essence of ECW, providing fans with a taste of the promotion's unique brand of hardcore wrestling. The faithful representation of the wrestlers, solid gameplay mechanics, and extensive creator wrestler mode are commendable aspects of the game. However, the dated graphics, limited movesets, and lack of an in-depth story mode hinder the overall experience. Despite its flaws, I still have fond memories of playing this when I was younger, and I had a great time going back to review it today. ECW Hardcore Revolution remains a nostalgia trip for fans of the promotion such as myself, and a respectable attempt at translating ECW's extreme spirit into the realm of video games.
It's time for everybody's favorite wrestler, Rob Van Dam.
Since his controversial exit at the end of the crumbling ECW in 2001, Paul Heyman has cemented himself as a prominent figure in the professional wrestling industry and has been associated with WWE in various roles over the years. One of his most notable contributions to the company has been as a manager and advocate for several top wrestlers, commonly referred to as Paul Heyman guys. Heyman's managerial skills, charismatic personality, and exceptional mic work have helped elevate the careers of some wrestlers throughout his tenure in the company. Though a sporadic association, Paul Heyman had managed Big Show on a few occasions, most notably during the early 2000s. Heyman had previously managed several wrestlers in WCW and ECW, but Big Show's allegiance showed that he could perform those same duties on a bigger stage. Heyman and CM Punk formed a partnership in 2012, during which Heyman served as Punk's advocate while he was WWE champion. Their alliance added depth and intrigue to Punk's character, with both men benefiting from the alliance. Their stature grew, until the eventual dramatic climax of their partnership, with both men betraying one another on different occasions. Part of that betrayal between CM Punk and Heyman surrounded Curtis Axel, the son of WWE Hall of Famer Mr. Perfect, who had aligned himself with Paul Heyman in 2013, hoping to boost his career prospects. I've always had a soft spot in my heart for Axel, believing him to have shown great improvements around this time. However, his family name and desire to grow still didn't allow him to flourish under Paul Heyman during a rather lackluster pairing. In 2014, Heyman briefly became the advocate for Antonio Cesaro, helping to establish him as a formidable competitor in an attempt to elevate him to main event status. Cesaro has the look, he has the in-ring technique, fitness and strength, but was always seen as somewhat lukewarm on the microphone by Vince McMahon and other WWE decision makers. Paul Heyman was the perfect fit to do the talking outside of the ring, while Cesaro did his best communicating inside of it. Arguably the most iconic association in all of Heyman's career, he was Brock Lesnar's advocate for many years. Heyman played a pivotal role in promoting Lesnar as the Beast Incarnate, and had been the mouthpiece for Lesnar during various championship reigns, including Lesnar's iconic ending of Undertaker's defeated WrestleMania streak. Most recently, Paul Heyman has once again proved that he is smart enough to be able to change his character and presentation with the times, keeping him up as one of the only performers who appeared in the 1980s to still be relevant in the modern era, aligning himself with the big dog Roman Reigns. Initially, Reigns had faced a mixed reception from the WWE Universe as a singles competitor. Despite being pushed as a heroic figure, certain fans resisted his booking as the top babyface, However, WWE made a pivotal creative decision in August of 2020 that significantly altered Reigns' character and the fans' perception of him. At WWE's Payback event, Roman Reigns returned after a brief hiatus and aligned himself with Paul Heyman, who became his new on-screen advocate. This move marked a significant change in Reigns' character as he adopted a more edgy and villainous persona, often referring to himself as the tribal chief and the head of the table in reference to his Samoan heritage and wrestling lineage. With Heyman by his side, Roman Reigns has dominated WWE as a calculated heel character. He held the WWE Universal Championship for an extended period and became one of the most captivating and talked about characters in all of pro wrestling. The partnership with Heyman added a new layer of depth to Reigns' persona and helped solidify his status as WWE's top star. Paul Heyman is the man who undoubtedly gained the most personal success after the collapse of ECW. He was after all the man credited with revolutionising Eastern Championship Wrestling and bringing a tiny bingo hall in Philadelphia to the world. However, he was also the man solely responsible for its total collapse. For many hardcore ECW fans, Paul Heyman serves as a controversial figure, beloved for his creative genius and willingness to push the boundaries, while also seen as a traitor for the way that he exited the company to WWE, and a liar for the way he supposedly misled his staff, friends and family. For me, Paul Heyman should be recognised as a con-man and a swindler, but also, and more importantly, perhaps one of the single greatest pro wrestling masterminds of the last 100 years. With its unique blend of hardcore wrestling, edgy storylines, and unparalleled athleticism. However, despite its initial success, a series of challenges ultimately led to ECW's demise. During its rise, ECW stood out as a beacon of innovation. It introduced a gritty and realistic style of wrestling that resonated with a generation hungry for an alternative to the mainstream offerings of WWE and WCW. ECW showcased a roster of talented performers, many of whom would go on to become household names in the industry. The promotion's unapologetic embrace of violence and adult-orientated content provided a stark contrast to the more sanitized product of its competitors, attracting a dedicated fanbase that craved an edgier form of entertainment. Despite its popularity, however, ECW faced numerous financial and operational challenges that ultimately contributed to its downfall. The promotion struggled with limited financial resources, relying on a patchwork of funding sources to stay afloat. This constant financial strain led to a revolving door of talent and an inability to compete with the deep pockets of larger promotions. In addition, ECW faced legal battles and controversies surrounding its content, which placed further strain on its resources and reputation. Recognizing the popularity of the hardcore and edgy aesthetic, these larger promotions lured away ECW's top stars, leaving the promotion scrambling to rebuild its roster on more than one occasion. This exodus of talent, coupled with mounting financial difficulties, ultimately proved insurmountable, and the original ECW was gone by 2001, even if they did try to keep it going over the next 2 decades. All I can tell you is 25 years later, people are still saying ECW at shows. It gives me goosebumps. It's amazing that all these years later the fans still remember ECW and chant it at shows. It will never die. However, while ECW may have fallen, its impact on the wrestling industry is undeniable. The promotion's influence can be seen in the way that pro wrestling is presented today, with a greater emphasis on violence, athleticism, a more diverse range of characters, and a willingness to push the boundaries of storytelling. ECW's legacy lives on in the hearts of its passionate fan base, as well as in the careers of the wrestlers who honed their craft within these hallowed halls.